Are we ready? Welcome everyone to tonight's Committee of the Whole for our March 16th, 2021 Auburn City Council meeting. The City Council should have the minutes from the March 2nd, 2021 Committee of the Whole. Do I have any additions or corrections? If not, do I have a move to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
And the minutes carry forth. East Alabama Mental Health Center Board of Directors, Mayor Pro Tem Whitman.
Yes, sir. We have one vacancy. Term begins April 1, 2021, ends March 31, 2027. The incumbent, Kristen Herring, has served one partial and one full term. She did not apply. I would like to nominate Sheila Holmes.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second for Sheila Holmes. Any discussions or questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion carries, and we'll approve Ms. Holmes later on the agenda. Auburn Public Library.
We have one vacancy. Term begins April 15th, 2021, and ends April 14th, 2025. We have an incumbent, Bonnie McElwain, who served one partial term. I would like to nominate Bonnie McElwain for a second, or for, I guess, our first full term.
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And we will confirm Ms. McElwain later on in the agenda. West Pace Village Improvement District Board of Directors.
There's one vacancy, an unexpired term, which begins immediately and ends September the 15th, 2024. And we had only one application, and I'd like to nominate Barry Jones.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for Barry Jones. Any comments or questions? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that motion carries forth, and we'll confirm that later on in the agenda. Questions for tonight's agenda for the city manager?
If you don't have questions, I have two quick things for you. One of which is under ordinances this evening. We will be returning, if council's amenable, when it's not public hearings, to the way that things used to be, where I'll give an overview of the item, and then one of you would introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent. And with a second, the mayor would ask if anybody has a problem moving forward this evening to indeed confirm unanimous consent. And from there, as long as nobody's denying unanimous consent, the mayor would ask for any discussion. And if there's no discussion, you would move straight to a roll call vote. On items that have public hearings, you'll still, I'll give an overview, you'll still introduce it, get a second, you'll end up roll call voting on unanimous consent, we'll have a public hearing, and then you would move to approve after the public hearing is closed to bring the business forward, and then have discussion again and a second roll call. But there are 11 items on your agenda that don't have public hearings, and this is the way the ordinance process used to flow, and it's perfectly and procedurally correct if you're amenable. So I'll be happy to help, but when we get to those items where we get to stop signs and mile per hour signs and so on, once I'm done with my description, if somebody's willing to introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent and there's a second, that would be great. The second item is I emailed you this afternoon about the short-term rental ordinance, a few things. One key thing is the acting planning director had reached out to me and said that planning commission from 2019 all the way through to October of 2020 had considered two items about short-term rentals that weren't covered in the proposed amendments, proposed ordinance for this evening. And I'm asking you, I've vetted this with the city attorney, to consider these two items tonight. You do not have to make any amendments to consider these if you do not wish to consider these this evening. There are two amendments having to do with some standards in section 51104 of the zoning ordinance that is clarifying some things with homestays. One of which is item number 1, it's 51104B1. We'd be adding the word "with exception of homestays" to the second sentence. This exempts homestays from something other home occupations have to do, which is using only a maximum of 500 square feet of their property for said home occupation. And the second amendment is section 51104B, number 10. You'd add the phrase "with the exception of homestays" at the start of the first sentence, and then adding the second sentence, adding a whole second sentence saying parking in connection with homestays may use available on-street parking areas only when off-street parking can be accommodated. Those items, that's clarifying that homestays are encouraged to use their on-street parking, but they can use off-street parking when on-street parking, how about I could say that better? They should use their on-premise parking, the parking that's already on the property, first for homestays. And second, they can use on-street parking if need be, but it's gently asking people and reminding them to use parking on the property. The way we have to word things in ordinances can confuse, obviously, even me sometimes, so I apologize for that. But those are things I emailed you about. If somebody's willing to introduce them at some point during short-term rentals, great. If you're not willing to do so, totally understood. And we will take these to Planning Commission at the May meeting, and you would see them at the second meeting in June, which would be June 15th. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions? Okay. Megan, I wanted to take some time real quick to, we discussed this Friday at our work session about the city going ahead and moving forward with the roundabout at Wire and Cox Road. Could you elaborate for our citizens what we're talking about there and if there's any updates to that?
Absolutely, Mayor. I brought to the council's attention on Friday during our packet meeting that a longstanding capital project, which is the Cox and Wire Road roundabout, that we've been working on since 2018, had a multi-month delay. We were hoping that would be bid by the Alabama Department of Transportation in the month of May of 2021. And ALDOT had recently informed the city engineer that project would not be bid, or they call it letting, until November of 2021, causing a lengthy delay in the project. ALDOT was kind enough to offer us a grant in 2019 to fund the design and construction of the roundabout. We've utilized some of that money for the design, but at this stage, this delay would cause up to a 9-month delay in the delivery of a roundabout at Cox and Wire. There's a lot of citizen concerns about safety at that intersection. We've acquired right-of-way. It's fully designed. We would have minor things we would need to change to get that out to bid pretty immediately, so we could be under construction very early this summer and hopefully deliver the project not much after the first of the year. So with that being said, I recommended to the council on Friday that you consider allowing me to move this forward in our capital plan, go out to bid with it. City council, if they were amenable, we would award the bid and say the May timeframe. And over the summer, when we're amending the mid-biennium budget, you would agree in the mid-biennium budget to add $1.2 million to cover the cost of the construction of the roundabout. And so that is what I asked the council. I've heard favorably from the majority of the council that they would like to proceed with that project. So unless there are any questions, I am instructing the city engineer to go ahead and proceed with getting this out to bid, and we will fund it with the city's general fund.
Mr. Dawson, that's the heart of your ward out there, and you've been championing this project for a long time. Would you like to say anything? Can't hear you, Tommy.
Now,
There you go.
I just appreciate Megan's forethought in this and bringing it up. And it's one of the worst intersections in the entire city. I've gotten lots of emails from our constituents out here that are wanting the same thing, improvements on the intersection. And we feel like a roundabout is something that would definitely improve it. Unless you see it, you can't really imagine what traffic is like at that intersection at 5 o'clock on a work day, and particularly when we're having events at the soccer complex. It's very dangerous, and we've lost one young man out there in the intersection to a motor vehicle accident. We've lost one just below the intersection, and I think it's time we got something done. I know from talking with Megan, it would be January 2022 before it's even put out for bid if we stay like we are now. Well, we could put it out for bid in the next week or so and possibly be completed by January or spring of next year. So I think it's something we definitely need to do. And I appreciate the council's interest in this. And I appreciate all of them talking favorable about it. And I appreciate all the citizens that have contacted us about it. And I also appreciate Megan and getting her staff to put the speed signs out there. I believe that's actually helped as well, and I appreciate that for a temporary fix on it, or temporary help on that intersection. But I just appreciate the council for being aggressive to take care of our citizens once again.
Thank you, Chief. So Megan, with the response you received from the council, what we'll do is we'll move ahead with the bid, and then ultimately the council will have to approve the expenditure, right?
That's correct. You would, by approving the bid, it means you're generally agreeing to the expenditure, and then we formally just amend the budget. Because we're in a 2-year budget cycle, we make adjustments in what we call mid-biennium, which happens in the middle of this summer. And then we also adjust the budget ordinance to include that project. And this will allow us, we're appreciative of AlDOT. AlDOT was very generous to try to save us, well over $1 million to fund this project. And we appreciate them working with us, but we also felt there's a sense of urgency with this project. And this is one where we ought to dip into our savings a little bit to deliver improvements at a dangerous intersection much sooner than we would have been able to otherwise.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody else regarding this? All right. Do we have a move to adjourn this committee of the whole?
So moved.
We are adjourned the committee of the whole. It is 7:06, so we'll go right into the Auburn City Council meeting for March 16th, 2021 with the roll call. Lindsay.
Dawson,
Here.
Dixon,
Here.
Griswold,
Here.
Hovey,
Here.
Parsons. Parsons?
What happened to him?
I don't know. I saw him.
He was here.
Okay. Smith,
Present.
Taylor,
Here.
Witten,
Here.
Anders.
Here. Would you all please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and then for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Under announcements tonight, I want to remind everybody of some events we have coming up. Bark in the Park is this Saturday at Kiesel Park from 9 to 2. Empty Bowls is the next Saturday, March the 27th at 5 to 7. This is a fundraiser for the food bank. And then the next weekend is the Easter egg hunt at 10:30. And so these are all great events that have been part of our community for many years. And it's glad to see them back on the calendar for the next 3 weekends. I was thankful last meeting that Mr. Parsons brought up Justin Sanders, and I'm happy to report that his surgery went well and he's at home recovering. And I continue to ask our council and our community to be mindful of his recovery and continue to pray for he and his family as he gets better. Just the other day, I noticed that the parking deck is really coming along and it's very close to being finished. I would say personally, I'm very proud of the way it looks. I think it's a great, it blends in well with our downtown, and I look forward to us parking cars in there in the near future. And Ms. Crouch, when do you expect us to have that open?
Well, the project's on schedule to be completed, but we have some delays on the Baptist Student Union portion. And so I need to work with the contractor to determine exactly when we're going to open it, if that will interfere with some completion. We're just doing some ventilation work in there, but sometime in the month of May, I'm hopeful that it will be available for public parking. We also need to amend the parking ordinance. We don't speak to this parking deck at all in terms of fee structures and so on. So the city council will see that in April in preparation of opening that parking deck.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. Also, Megan and I have been talking to the leadership at the hospital, along with the leadership of the city of Opelika in the last couple of days, about extending the vaccination clinic at the Tuesday morning site on Opelika Road. East Alabama Medical Center reached out to us and would like to extend the lease and the use of that center through the end of May. And so the city has gotten together with the tenant, and I mean with the owner of the shopping center, and certainly working with our staff here, led by our public safety staff. And I see Will on the call tonight. Thank you, Will, for all that you've done. And so we're trying to work towards allowing that to be open through the month of May. as you have seen with the statistics that are being shared with us, they're doing incredible numbers out there. They've got a lot of momentum, and they feel like they can make good use of it through the end of the spring. Did I capture all that pretty well, Ms. Crouch?
You did. We're appreciative of the partnership, and also the Chambers of Commerce of Auburn and Opelika are working hard to feed the volunteers out there. And I spoke with Anna Hobie today, and she made a commitment on behalf of the Auburn Chamber to continue to do whatever they needed to do to help assist us. And they may be stepping up and providing some additional employee assistance from the chamber while we cover the month of May. So I'm really appreciative of that effort as well.
Great effort. I went by there about 7:45 today, and the parking lot was already full, and just very thankful for all the people who are making that happen. And then finally, just a reminder, the next couple of days are going to be pretty stressful with the weather, and I encourage our community to be aware of what's going on. And tomorrow night is scheduled to be the worst part of it. So please be aware of the weather and take care of yourself and your family as we prepare to welcome this weather in here in the next couple of days. All right. City council members, does anybody has an announcement?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
I missed roll call because I had some connectivity issues, so I'm
That's
back.
fine. We got you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else with an announcement from the council? Okay. I forgot to go back through the committee of the whole. Tonight during the committee of the whole, we appointed Ms. Sheila Holmes to the East Alabama Mental Health Board of Directors. We reappointed Bonnie McElwain to the Library Board, and we appointed Barry Jones to the West Pace Improvement District Board of Directors. Okay. We also talked about the Wire Road Roundabout project, and the city's going to take the lead on that and try to get that bid here very soon and move that completion up a long time to provide a more safer transportation area for our community out there. All right. Auburn University Communications, Abby.
Yes. Also, bear with me. The weather has kind of been making my internet act weird today. Sorry if I cut out, but only a few things. So first, the big event will occur on Saturday, March 27th this year. And if you aren't aware, it's a one-day service project put on by students that allows Auburn students to give back to the community that gives so much to us year round. So that's going to be on March 27th, and we're really excited. Next, the Auburn Panhellenic Council received 3 awards for community engagement and leadership at the Southeastern Greek Leadership Conference. And finally, in March and April, the Innovation and Research Commons is offering socially distanced guided tours for the public for their newly renovated Auburn library space on the first floor of the Ralph Braun Library. So you can register for those tours on the Auburn Library website. And that's all for me tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Abby. We appreciate it. Look forward to all the great work from the big event here a week from Saturday. Thank y'all for doing that. All right. This time is citizens communications for items on the agenda. This is only items on the agenda. Remember, there are a number of items, including the short-term rentals that has its own public hearing. So I would ask you to save your comments for that later. But if there's any other item on tonight's agenda that does not have a public hearing that you would like to speak to the council on, now is the time to do that. Please give us your name and address for the record, and you will have 5 minutes to speak to us.
You're gonna raise their hand.
Yeah, please raise your hand on the Zoom. See anyone? Okay. We do not see anyone at this time. So we'll move to city manager's communications.
Well, the nice thing is I don't have any communications this evening. I handled that during committee of the whole. So Mayor, our first item of business this evening is the consent agenda. Does any council member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and deal with that item individually?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Item 8D. 8D as in dog. 8E3.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else?
All right.
Okay, we'll take 8D to begin with.
So item 8D authorizes an application submittal to the State of Alabama Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Program for fiscal year 2020 for additional CDBG COVID funding already received by the city in the amount of $750,000.
Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
All right.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Ms. Taylor?
Okay, just I did read through the packet and everything on these items. But just for the public to know exactly what these funds are gonna, that $750 are going to be available for. First of all, I wanted to know the $413,000 is going toward equipment. What, just for public knowledge, what type of equipment?
Okay, Al Davis is coming on. He's our community services director, and I can have him run through those as well. But Al, if you're ready and would like to do that, that'd be great.
No problem at all. Good evening, council. We are very pleased the state was able to allocate funding to the city from their allocation. State received a little over $40 million from the CARES Act and decided to distribute those dollars based on population to the 15 entitlement cities, which they allocated about 13 million. And then the remaining 25 million they allocated to the counties. One of the things they requested that the entitlement cities do, and the counties as well, is to collaborate with each other, make sure they communicated with the local health authorities, as well as the hospital and EMA, to make sure that we were meeting the needs locally. As we began to look at what we could do with the funding in Lee County, I coordinated with my counterparts with both Lee County and the city of Opelika. One of the requirements from the state is that we could not duplicate funding. And so we chose to work with the food bank, where my counterparts and other cities decided on some projects that would not duplicate our efforts. So the focus was on the food bank. They're located in Auburn, of course, and it seemed fitting that would be one of the agencies that we could really help through this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. So one of the biggest needs the food bank has right now is equipment. Because of the vast amount of food that they're dealing with, they needed some additional refrigerated space. They needed some additional equipment to move pallets around. They needed a refrigerated van to be able to deliver the food to all the various food pantries throughout the communities. Basic things like a forklift, coolers and freezers were made need as well. So that's also part of the equipment funding. So those items added up to the $413,000 dollars you see in your packet. And I think those dollars will be well spent to help the food bank continue to provide food to not only those that live in Auburn and Lee County, but throughout this region.
Thank you, Al.
Okay, one other question, Al. What does it mean on this last page about beneficiary information? I saw a little chart there. So what is that?
That's indicating the total number of people that we expect that will benefit from each of these activities. And you can see it's a fairly large number of individuals that we think would benefit from the various activities. So that's what that means.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you, Al. I was on mute.
No problem.
Yeah, you good. You good. Any other questions from the council regarding this agenda item? Thank you, Al, for y'all's hard work on this. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and the motion carries. Now 8E3.
All right, item 8E3 is authorizing a loan of $500,000 from the Community Development Block Grant Section 108 Loan Program to the Auburn Housing Authority to assist with the redevelopment of the first phase of the Ridgecrest housing community. They're redeveloping that whole thing, which will also become another agenda item later. But this first phase will be supporting the first 62 units. The Section 108 loan program is something the city has had for some time, and our support of this really helps the potential of the housing authority to receive low-income housing tax credits that are needed to help finance this project. So that's the main introduction of it. We have Philip Dunlap on the line, who manages our 108 loan program. We also have Sharon Tolbert, the executive director of the Auburn Housing Authority, who can answer any questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Megan. All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have
Second.
a second? All right, Got a motion and a second. Connie, I'll turn it back over to you for the first question or comment.
Okay, just once again, just to let the public know exactly what's going on with this. Okay, I saw in the packet where there are 106 units and it's only gonna be 62 units redeveloped. So what is gonna happen with the 44 remainder of not the, well, the units I know probably would go away, but those tenants?
Okay, we have Sharon Tolbert available, and Sharon, we just promoted you to be able to speak. Are you able to come on and answer that?
Yes, I am. Can you all hear me?
We can. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you all and good evening, everyone. Even before I answer this question, I just really want to thank the city, all the staff, and I hate to call names because I don't want to leave everybody out, but Megan, the mayor, Philip, Allison, Kate, Katie, thank you all so much for all that you've done to assist us with getting these items on the planning commission agenda and also here tonight. To answer the question about the units that's going to be developed, we're doing it in phases. With the low-income housing tax credits, the amount of funding that you receive is based on the number of units that you do, the number of units you redevelop. We initially did a financial forecast of 106 units, and we just didn't have, it just wasn't affordable for us to do that. So with our redevelopment, we're looking at actually 3 phases of the redevelopment. The first phase, as Councilwoman Taylor questioned, was the 62 units. The 62 units, our course of action, we anticipate, once we receive the funding, is demolishing the 62 units and the families that we're currently housed. We will absorb all of the relocation costs for our families. And our whole intent is to revitalize, starting with our Ridgecrest site, in an effort to remove the institutional look of public housing. Our units currently meet all of the housing HUD protocols when it comes to the units being habitable. But our goal, as along with approval by the board, is to revitalize our units, to invest in our families in the Northwest Auburn community. So the 62 units is desired to be demolished, and our goal is for those units to be developed as townhomes. Our goal is not to create another apartment complex, but to provide a housing community. As I stated, this is our efforts to invest in our families in Northwest Auburn, and we're not able to do this without the partnership and the investment for the city. So I thank you all so much for that. And the remaining 44 units will remain until phase 2 is completed.
Okay.
Phase 2 is a 2-year process. And I think I have David Garcia on the phone. He's with our development team that can speak to this as well. And also with phase 3, our goal is to have a development on our site as well in phase 3 as a senior development. So this will be a multi-phase development. Before we do any development, we'll have meetings, of course, continue with the city, most importantly with our residents. The residents will be fully informed of what their rights are, what our plans are, and then also to receive their input as well. So once we're funded, the construction probably not begin until the 1st of January. But one of our most important parts of this process is relocation. So we are working on developing a relocation plan on what that looks like. So David Garcia, I don't know if you're on the phone. If you are, David can speak to that. I mean, excuse me, on the Zoom call. If you are, David can go more in detail regarding the whole development process.
I am, and can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for having us. And Sharon, I think you summarized it perfectly. We would have ideally liked to do the total 106 units at once, but the funding available per applicant every year through Alabama Housing just doesn't allow it. So we're doing the first 262 units. As Sharon said, we will demolish them. We will pay for the full temporary relocation of all of the existing residents at nearby adjacent properties. And then once the property is complete, all of those existing residents will come back to their brand new units. And then once that first phase is complete, we will reapply for 9% tax credits a couple years down the road and do the remaining 44 units. And then once that phase is complete, a couple years down the road, we will look to do a hopefully a new construction senior property on a portion of the property.
Thank you, David. Ms. Taylor, you've gotten a couple reports there. Any other questions you might have?
Well, actually, I did have another question, but they answered that question along with the statement. But I just want to say, I am just so thankful and that they are getting ready to bring affordable homes into Ward 1. And that is, and I just want to thank Sharon for working so hard on this, because when I first got on the council, she was actually at my community meeting and she mentioned it. And so here it is 2.5 years later, and it's actually about to happen. And I know that everybody is going to be happy just to know that one of the things that I am very impressed with is that the fact that she's worked hard in changing the image of the housing authority. And so to bring in townhomes to look like the rest of Auburn, I just think that is just, that is just awesome, Sharon. And I just want to thank you. And I just wish we could do this all over Auburn. And I know we probably can, but it's gonna take a little time and everything. But this is a start of a new beginning. And I think that the residents and the community in Ward 1 is gonna be very happy with this process. So I just want to thank everybody that's supporting this. And I'm just delighted right now. So thanks again for everybody that played a part in it.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for those wonderful comments. And this, where we are, we would not be where we are without of course, the approval from my Board of Commissioners on trying to fulfill this vision for the housing authority, but most importantly, the support of the city. So thank you all so much for all that you've done, not just with this program. We've done this before with Moton. So a lot of housing authorities just are not fortunate as we are on having this wonderful relationship with their municipality. So thank you all for what you have done, what you're doing now, and what I'm sure you probably do in the future. So thank you so much for your consideration with this item.
And just to know that their families are not going to be displaced, that's awesome. That's just great news, because I think probably by the time it hit the public and you say 62 homes and people looking at, well, where are we going to go to other 44? So I know when it does come to the public, everybody's going to be glad to know that nobody's going to be displaced and everybody have a place to live. And that's a worry that people won't have to actually worry about.
That's exactly right. We'll take care of our families.
Anyone else on the council have a comment or question? Okay, congratulations, Sharon. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you also, David, for joining us. And we look forward to working alongside you guys to make this project happen. All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right.
I appreciate it.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, do I have a move to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and the consent agenda is now carried forward.
All right, Mayor, under ordinances this evening, item 9A1 authorizes the installation of 4 stop signs in Brentwood subdivision, phases 1 and 2. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with a vote on this evening? Hearing none, are there any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Lindsay?
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9A2 authorizes the installation of 2 stop signs in Farmville Lake subdivision, phases 3B and 3C. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with a vote on this evening? Hearing none, is there any questions? Okay, Lindsay with a roll call?
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9A3 authorizes the installation of one stop sign in the preserve subdivision phase 4A-2. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent. Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? See the hearing none. Any questions? Okay, Lindsay?
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9A4 authorizes the installation of 3 stop signs in Wimberley Station subdivision, phase 3B. Unanimous consent is necessary.
introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
A motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Okay, hearing none. Any questions? Hearing no one, roll call, Lindsay?
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9A5 authorizes the installation of 3 stop signs in Woodward Oaks subdivision, phase 3. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce
Introduce
the
the
ordinance and ask for unanimous consent. Second.
All right. I have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Hearing none. Any questions? Okay, Lindsay?
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
All right, last one. Item 9A6 authorizes the installation of 2 stop signs and 1 25-mile-per-hour sign in Owens Crossing. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent. Second.
I have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Hearing none. Any questions or comments? Hearing no one, Lindsay with a roll call?
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
All right, item 9B1 enacts the annual renewal of ad valorem taxes for city taxes, 5 mils for general purposes, also known as the general fund, and 5 mils for capital debt repayment, also known as a special 5 mil tax. Council must annually renew the property taxes to authorize the Lee County Revenue Commissioner to assess city property taxes. This is a renewal of existing taxes. There are not new taxes or tax increases. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
I have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Hearing none. Any questions or comments?
Just one more time, Mayor, if I may. This is not a new tax. This is something we do every year.
Exactly.
It's correct. You do it every year and you have 3 agenda items that are dealing with this. This is the first of 3.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Lindsay?
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes,
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9B2 enacts the annual renewal of ad valorem taxes for school taxes, 11 mills for educational purposes known as Special School Tax Fund. Council must annually renew the property taxes to authorize the Lee County Revenue Commissioner to assess city property taxes. Again, this is a renewal of existing taxes. These are not new taxes nor tax increases. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Hearing no one, any questions or comments? Hearing no one, Lindsay?
Witten,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9B3 enacts the annual renewal of ad valorem taxes for school taxes, 5 mills for educational purposes, also known as the Special School Tax Fund. Council must annually renew the property taxes to authorize the Lee County Revenue Commissioner to assess city property taxes. This is a renewal of existing taxes. There are not new taxes nor any tax increases. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? All right, any questions or comments?
One quick question.
Sure.
This 5 mil tax, this is what the school board controls for construction projects. Is that correct?
So that 5 mil, I'll have our finance director answer this in case I'm wrong, but the 5 mil, special 5 mil tax fund that the city is dedicating to the schools was done in item 9B1. Is that the one you're referring to, Kelly?
I'm not sure. You tell me.
Yes, Allison's nodding.
That's the special. I got you. Okay, that's the
Yes,
special one.
is that the one you're referring to?
Yep.
Okay, Allison, this other one was just a voted on ad valorem tax for educational purposes.
Got it.
Exactly right.
Okay.
I had the two crossed over.
Right, so this one was already, Kelly, dedicated to the schools per how it was adopted, but the other one is the one that we give, and item 9B1 is that's the capital fund one that we call a special 5 mil tax.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Lindsay?
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
All right, item 9C1 is a request from Malcolm and Wanda Marsh to annex approximately 2.81 acres of property located at 2425 Lee Road 809, also known as Pinewood Place. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? All right, any questions? Okay, hearing none. Lindsay with a roll call?
Dixon,
Yes.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
Item 9C2 is a request from Jamie H. Freeman to annex approximately 0.88 acres of property located at 2405 Lee Road 809, also known as Pinewood Place. Unanimous consent is necessary.
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, have a motion and seconds. Anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with the vote on this evening? Okay, hearing none. Is there any questions or comments? Okay, Lindsay?
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon,
Yes.
Anders.
Yes.
All right, item 9D includes various zoning ordinance amendments to Article 2, definitions, Article 4, general regulations, and Article 5, detailed use regulations, in order to establish short-term rental regulations. The proposed ordinance was first considered at the council's February 16th meeting, where it was amended by a vote of 5-3. The amendments caused the ordinance to need to be re-advertised. Therefore, this is considered a first reading of the short-term rental ordinance. Unanimous consent is necessary and a public hearing is required.
I'm
Okay.
going to recuse myself at this time and leave the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Council, we'll go procedurally as we have been with these ordinances. So we'll do this the long way. All right. So do I have a,
You're going to introduce it?
yeah, do I have an introduction? Anybody want to introduce this ordinance?
I'll introduce the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Does anyone on the council have a problem moving forward with a vote on this evening? Okay, hearing no one, we'll do the roll call on unanimous consent. Lindsay?
Hovey,
Yes, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Dixon. Oh, sorry. Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just like to explain for people listening that this is done different than the previous ordinances. The council did not vote to do anything with this ordinance other than to move it forward to be considered and to open a public hearing, which the mayor is about to do. So no vote has taken place other than the council is willing to consider this item this evening. And that's all they've done to date. Mayor?
Okay. At this time, we will open the public hearing. If you would like to speak, please give us your name and address for the record. You would need to raise your hand on the Zoom apparatus. I do not know how many people will speak tonight, but I ask that you be considerate that there could be a long group of people who would like to speak tonight. So please try to be as efficient as you can without taking away what you'd like to say. And we certainly want you to be able to speak to everything that you would like to speak to. So we'll go through these as we see your name, as we see your hand raised, and we'll call on you. So the first person up is Joshua Poole.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Joshua.
Glad to be chatting with you guys again. So again, my name is Josh Poole. I live at 334 Hickory Woods Drive. My zone is DDH. And I've lived in Auburn since 2012. My wife and I just recently bought our first home. And one of the reasons we bought the home and did buy the home what we did was that we could make some extra money off sharing our bedroom. Pre-COVID, we enjoyed having guests over frequently, and we love meeting new people. We use Airbnb. We're avid users all throughout the nation and all throughout Europe, so we're very familiar with the platform, that and Verbo. And we love having guests over, both people we do and don't know. We have family stay with us a lot. We have friends stay with us a lot. And so it doesn't, none of that seems to be an issue. However, the only issue seems to be that if we charge these people. And so if we have, let's say we have a friend that's down in their luck, or someone staying with us from out of town, they're staying with us for an amount of time. If they're, yeah, we can open up our homes to them and share, but if they're, what's wrong with them throwing a few bucks at us to help pay for utilities or, things like that. So for that purpose, I don't see an issue. And some people think that short-term rentals are a degradation to the neighborhood, but I think it's the complete opposite. Typically, these properties are much more well-maintained because they're taking pride in it. They live there, but also this is partly a side business. So they have to have a nice residence to get these people in. And this isn't riffraff off the street that people think that these are terrible people staying in their neighborhoods. No one would let terrible people stay in their homes. Likely, these platforms, you set up very strict rules. There's typically no events. There's a limited number of people. You still have to follow local ordinances on traffic, trash, noise, and all that stuff. So it's really no different than having people in my home staying there for free versus them paying for it. It's this whole thing just seems completely nonsensical and such like a problem that's trying to be fixed that doesn't need to be fixed. Like, why fix something that isn't broken? I know people are complaining about it, but it seems like they have a fundamental lack of understanding of what short-term rentals are. In my opinion, I think long-term rentals are more of a degradation to your neighborhood because those tend to be less maintained. You have less control over who your neighbors are. With short-term rentals, it's your neighbor. They're just sharing a bedroom, or maybe they're going out of town for a weekend and someone, they're renting their place out. So I guess I'm just at a loss on how like an occasional guest staying with me in my house on my property affects my neighbors if we're already following local ordinances. And I would like to point out that I really liked Councilwoman Beth Whitten's amendment that she proposed at the last meeting when we talked about this. I just think this is ridiculous that it's even an issue. And I don't see how this is any different than any other gig type service like Uber, Lyft, Turo, House Swap, Couch Surfer, any of that. And all those car services had similar backlash in the past, which is also, in my opinion, irrational. So it just doesn't seem that this is, it just seems like there's a lack of understanding and a fear of change. Like you're going to have bad people coming in your neighborhood when it's just your neighbors simply sharing their space. So I fully support short-term rentals everywhere in Auburn. And I think they're a good thing for people to share their homes. It's a good thing for people coming in out of town. These are visiting professors. These are visiting grad students. This is people who are on vacation, visiting family for graduation, anything. These are people just trying to find a reasonable place. And when my wife and I travel, we like staying with Airbnbs because we like meeting the people. We like getting some local intel on places to eat, things to do, what we should see. And so we may not get that at a hotel. It's not as such a homey experience. So that's my somewhat long-winded spiel on why I fully support Airbnbs, short-term rentals, Verbos, whatever you want to call them in town. And Megan, I actually had a very specific question that I would like you to ask, or I would like you to answer. If short-term rentals have been in Auburn for a number of years now, and people have been renting them in NC and DDH in all residential zones, it's only recently that they got a name, these short-term rentals. So some people have called them illegal. So either Ron or Megan, as the city managers and mayor, can you please explain how they've been allowed for this long? Are they currently legal or illegal? And what are the repercussions? Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Ms. Crouch, are you prepared to answer that question? Would you like to?
I'll be happy to answer at the pleasure of the council. If you want to, we have a lot of people that want to speak tonight. If you're asking me to respond, I'll respond, council, but that's at your pleasure. The public hearing is for and against items that are going on and for you to glean information. So if the council's asking me to respond, I'll respond.
Could we do the response at the end, maybe?
It's at the pleasure of the council.
Council, what would y'all like?
At the end, please.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, well, that's that question at the end. All right. The next hand I see raised is Chip Townsend.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, this is Chip Townsend again. I'm at 516 South Gay Street. I've spoken to you before. I won't reiterate all the same reasons and waste your time, but I will say that I remain opposed to any short-term rentals or homestays in NC zoning, and really in NC, LDD, or DDH zoning, that they should not occur there. I want to make 2 points, and I'm so glad that y'all are going to consider responding to some citizen issues at the end. Because I feel like y'all have been listening to a lot of public input, but you have not really responded to many of the issues that have come up. And I hope that you all will maybe make a few notes as we go through this, and at the end you can address more issues than just the last one. Actually, I agree with the last speaker that I would love for you to address the legality or illegality. And I want to tell you that I found since the last meeting a postcard that the city mailed to me. Now, the city didn't date this postcard. I hope y'all know when it went out. but it was during a time when the city was expressing itself on this issue. I'm going to read you the first sentence of it, and then I'm going to read you the one sentence paragraph that follows that. We are writing to you because we have identified you as a homeowner and or a resident or a property management company of a property located in an NC, LDD, or DDH zoning district in the city limits of Auburn. I'll skip from there. The remainder of that paragraph talks mostly about that you can't have too many unrelated people living there. In addition, this is the next paragraph. In addition, any rental of residential property for less than 100 days, 80 days of continuous occupation, such as game day rentals, is prohibited, bold and capitalized, by the city within the aforementioned zoning districts. Now, y'all mailed this to me, and you apparently mailed it to everyone in the NC, LDD, and DDH zoning districts to make sure we knew that. You mailed it to property management companies, I guess realtors, to make sure they knew that. The city explicitly stated its position then. To my knowledge, they've never mailed me another postcard saying we changed our mind. Perhaps I missed it. Please tell me if I did. I believe that continues to govern, and we continue to have these public hearings where people say, don't take away my right. And I would say that based on this, you don't have that right. You've been doing something you shouldn't have done. So I do hope y'all will address that. The next issue I want to bring up, and I don't want to get too tedious on this, but I have the ordinance in front of me. Now that you folks are considering putting homestays in my neighborhood, I've read the homestay portion more closely. I believe that the spirit of what you're trying to do with homestays is less intensive than short-term primary rentals, non-primary rentals. However, when I read the ordinance, you define in section 203 a short-term non-primary rental as renting for periods of less than 30 consecutive days. The homestay definition does not say that. I can't find anywhere in the ordinance that says that. And what that tells me is that if I'm reading that right, and I hope I'm not, but please look into this. If I, or worse, my neighbor wants to rent their house to 6 students for fall quarter, they can. I don't believe that's the spirit of what you're trying to do, but I don't believe the ordinance presently stops anything at 30 days. Another issue that I believe calls for more intensive use in homestay than in short-term non-primary rental is you limit the total number of days per year that the short-term non-primary rental can be rented out. It appears that the homestay, the owner can only be absent 90 days of its rental, but it appears it could be rented for 365 days if the owner were present for the remainder of the time. Those items in the ordinance concern me. If I'm misreading it, I apologize to all of you for wasting your time with that, but I hope you'll look into those issues and make sure it does what you want it to do. With that, again, I'll just say that I remain opposed to this commercial use in my neighborhood and neighborhoods like mine, and I hope that you all will do the right thing and re-amend the ordinance to eliminate homestays in these residential neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Matt Laney.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Yeah, Matt Laney, reside at 2406 Antler Ridge Drive. I'll start off by saying that I'm a firm supporter of a smaller limited government that supports entrepreneurship and the property rights of owners. So I can't in good conscience actually support this proposal as a whole. But having said that, I do have a couple of problems with 2 of the amendments as proposed. I've actually sent you an email and also spoke to you, Mayor Anders and the city manager as well about these problems. The first of which is the extremely narrow definition of how a homestay or short-term rental can be used and guests allowed. So I believe it's section D, number 6, part D, which says that the short-term rental or homestay can only be used for sleeping and eating. It prohibits unregistered guests, and it also prohibits private events. Now, what you have to understand is that the draw to these short-term rentals is for people that, don't live in Auburn to come to Auburn and experience the Auburn spirit, to tailgate, to enjoy time with family. So as it is written, somebody who's renting one of these rentals would not be able to come for their son or daughter's graduation to have a celebration of their graduation at that particular rental. And in fact, if they can't have any unregistered guests, they wouldn't even be able to have their own son or daughter utilize the property. And people want to come to these places to tailgate and like I said, to even maybe have a birthday party. And many of our owners in the city have updated these properties to provide a warm and welcoming, entertaining space for these people to use in a responsible manner. So I can't support that amendment at all. The second issue I have is with I guess I'll call it the 2 or 3 strike rule. I believe this is a very unbalanced punishment for owners who decide to use their short-term rentals or homestays for a little bit more extended period of time. For instance, if you have a short-term rental who uses theirs up to the maximum of 240 days out of the calendar year, they're going to be raking in a substantial amount of income for that year, possibly into the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, as opposed to somebody who's just renting it out maybe 2 weekends in the year. They're going to be obviously making substantially less. But the ordinance as it reads just says that essentially they have 2 strikes, whereas if they have 2 substantiated claims, which is not defined in the ordinance, I assume it's maybe noise complaints or something like that. But if they have 2, then they lose their certificate for the current year in addition to the following year. Now, for the person who rents out their property, say 240 times, 240 days of the year, that's going to be a significant income loss over the next portion of the year and the following year, like I said, in the thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Whereas to the person who rents it out 2 weekends in the year, it's, it's a hit, but it's not terrible, but it's incredibly unbalanced. And if you look at the ratio, so if those 2 owners both had 2 complaints against them throughout the year, well, the person who rented it out 240 days of the year had a substantially less amount ratio-wise of complaints. So it's just an unfair and unbalanced punishment. And in addition to that, it's going to set up a system where neighbors who don't appreciate the short-term rentals or homestays are going to make petty complaints against their neighbors in order to try to get their license or their privilege revoked. And I just don't think that's part of the Auburn spirit or a neighborly spirit. So I would actually propose something similar to the way car insurance works. Whereas if you receive a violation or a substantiated complaint, maybe you get a couple of points against you. And the following year, the price for renewing your certificate for a short-term rental or homestay increases by a set amount. And if you receive, a certain amount of points per year, you can have your license revoked. But I just believe it's not balanced at all for those who wish to use their short-term rentals to a greater extent. And the prohibitions on unregistered guests and small private events is just against everything I believe in the property rights for owners. Appreciate you hearing this, and I hope you vote no against the amendments and the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna try to pronounce this, and please forgive me because I'm sure I'll get it wrong. Deanna Louise Katitan. How about that?
Hello, this is Vienna Louise Katainen.
All right.
Good evening. That was a good effort on your part.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
By the way, before I begin, I'd like to ask, is there a 5-minute limit on all of these?
No, ma'am, there's no limit.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. I live at 550 South Gay Street. My husband and I have lived here since 1984. We selected our 1938 house in this area because we loved this quiet neighborhood area, family area, close to Auburn University campus and close to the center of town. We made a good choice. We raised our son here. We walked to work doing our little bit to reduce traffic. We have supported the designation of this and other neighborhoods as neighborhood conservation zones. So we are troubled by recent efforts to allow money-making short-term rentals and homestays in neighborhood conservation zones, and so where some of the charges can be $1,000 or more per day. This evening, we therefore strongly urge council members to reconsider the vote taken last month on the amended ordinance, and we urge instead that council members vote to adopt the original version of the ordinance, which came out of the City Planning Commission. The City Commission worked diligently and ethically to produce a true compromise by allowing short-term rentals and homestays in most parts of the city, but not in zones previously designated as single-family residential. Indeed, some neighborhood conservation zones have covenants that specifically prohibit rentals. All family residential neighborhood conservation zones should prohibit short-term rentals and homestays. This is my sentiment, and I understand that many Auburn voters feel the same way. That's what I have to say, and thank you for your attention. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the work of the entire City Council.
Thank you. Okay, Susan Jones. Susan?
Mute. Thank you for letting me speak. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I just wanted to say I am living in a
Susan,
house.
can you give us, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you give your address, please?
Oh, sure. I'm at 365 Payne Street.
Thank you.
Okay. I am living in a house that I got back 12 years ago that was built by my grandparents in 1940. I've spent 8 years, 8.5, 9 years renovating it for use. When I got the house, went through a lawyer and a real estate agent, they were quick to inform me that I was in a zone where I could not do what I wanted with the house. Made me a little mad at the time, but living here this length of time, I now understand it a lot better. One of the things that I noticed was that when we have people living here full time, recently we had, in the last year, we've had 2 houses that were being used as illegal game day houses, one right next door to me, one right across the street. Those houses remained empty most of the year. No, they were not well maintained. They were maintained, but adequately, barely. I had to call the police to come see about problems at the houses during game days and things like that. But it was also a blight within the neighborhood because those houses were empty most of the time. I also live on a street where there are long-term rentals. We have college students because of the way this street was originally built, and there are long-term rentals, duplexes, quadruplexes, and we have college, those are for college students only. They are rented year-round. There are college students in them, and I don't have a problem because we go and I will go and talk to them, let them know when the garbage is picked up, different things like that. I'm in my 60s. If I need help lifting something, there's a house full of boys down the street and I can ask them to come, boys, young men in their 20s, that come help me move heavy equipment and everything. I also recognize what my neighbors are trying to do to keep this street a neighborhood street now, because when these 2 houses that are being renovated have been moved back into by homeowners with families, with children, The whole tenor of this end of the neighborhood has changed. It is, we go out to the ends of the driveway, even during this pandemic, we socially distance and we talk. We have, it's becoming that neighborhood community again. I have, in the last year or two, in one of the houses that was redone, heard children playing in the backyard, grandchildren. That's what the neighborhood conservation district was devised to do. And by turning it into game day houses and rentals and short rental stays and everything, we're losing that. And we've lost so much of that in Auburn. These areas were set aside as neighborhood conservation, and I would really like to see it stay that way. I also have a couple of questions for the council members, because some of this came up in the last meeting, and one of them was, there was a comment made by one of the council people about 500 signatures on a petition was just a mere slice of what was going on. My understanding is she received far fewer votes than that. That's I didn't check into it myself, but for her to win her seat, she didn't win that many votes. My question is really though, how many people have been willing to indicate in writing that they are an Auburn resident and that they live in a neighborhood conservation area, and they're willing to let the short-term rentals in? How many people have actually, is there an actual number? Because I have a feeling it's a far fewer number than 500, and I understand we're up to well over 500 now. And y'all talked about the enforcement of the codes for the short term, for the homestays, would be up to the neighbors to call the police if we needed to. Okay, even if we call the police, what are the sanctions against the offenders other than, oh, you can lose your ability to do this? Are y'all collecting any money off of them? Is it in any way viable for the city to allow these houses in here to be used this way? Are you actually drawing funds? And that's the bigger picture that people want. Oh, we can put money in the coffers by allowing these houses in these areas, because I understand it. I am living, as my real estate agent told me, I'm living on lakefront property in Auburn, Alabama. I am at the university. I'm walking distance to anything downtown you want to go to. But I don't want, I have enough game day traffic down this street as it is. I don't want people partying up and down the street. I don't want my lamppost out front being broken off again. I don't want my flower pots picked up and thrown down on the ground. I want it to be a neighborhood. I deal with the other because I realize I'm living close to the university, and game days, people get a little bit out there. I don't want it all the time. So what I'm saying is, please vote against the amendment. Allow the ordinance to stand as it was written up by the task force and approved by them. They put a lot of time and effort into it. Please support them and vote down the amendment. Vote it away, please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is Richard Brinker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Richard Brinker, 436 Summer Trees Drive in Auburn. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the council. We bought in the Cloverleaf subdivision in 1988 when we came to Auburn, as we saw this as a pleasant, safe, and welcoming neighborhood environment. The developer, Jack Bailey, was quite clear on the fact that he was developing the Cloverleaf subdivision as a neighborhood that reflected Auburn as a lovely village on the plain. Short-term rentals, as we now know, did not exist at that time. They have evolved and created many issues that Jack certainly would not have foreseen. So the short-term rental task force was created about 3 years ago. They worked an entire year with holding 3 work sessions and 2 public hearings to get input from citizens and homeowners. They then presented their work to the Auburn Planning Commission, who conducted 4 work sessions and went through 7 drafts. The Planning Commission voted 7-2 to accept the proposed ordinance, and it was presented to the council on February 16th, a month ago. A set of 4 appearingly well orchestrated amendments were presented that significantly changed the character of the work done by the short-term rental task force and the Auburn Planning Commission. I feel this undermines the diligent efforts of citizens working together to seek and utilize public input into this issue. I urge the council to listen to the voices of Auburn citizens who overwhelmingly want to preserve family neighborhoods and keep commercial lodging venues out of the neighborhood conservation zone. So I hope that the original proposed ordinance will be accepted. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the work that the council does because I know there are many thankless tasks that you must undertake. So thank you for your time and your service. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. We appreciate it. All right. Next is Brian Mitchell.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Thanks for letting me come on. Brian Mitchell, I live at 432 Breckenridge Court in Auburn. I'm not going to go into, everything about the proposal. I just really want to give the benefits. I'm a real estate agent in town. Deal with a lot of different property types, a lot of things close to campus. I just really want to give the benefit of why we should allow it in some regulated fashion. I'm not sure that it needs to be just anybody and everybody or no kind of regulations with it. But, the people come to Auburn so that, they can experience, what they had when they were coming to school here or just coming down to watch a ball game during football season. And we become what I guess it's the 5th or 6th largest town on game days. And look, we need those people in town spending their money here. And, my understanding is the hotels are booked. I've talked to hotel people before. I don't have any numbers charted out on what their vacancy rate is. I just know that all the clients that I talk to that try to come into town to look at property, every hotel's booked. So, having the ability to keep people in town, whether it's in a multifamily rated zone or in a NC rated neighborhood or LDD or whatever, it's a short stay. Typically these people are paying a lot of money to stay in those places. They're staying in somebody's home that does not want it trashed, or anything that could get damaged or whatever, because they're coming back home to it. So, but they're allowing people to stay in town, to go to the restaurants, to go to the bars, to go to the retail shops downtown, or any of the other businesses in town that might provide those services. So, when you look at monetarily for the city, you're talking about a big indirect tax revenue for the city, even if they don't collect any sales tax or rental tax on the transient rental itself. Those businesses are going to create more tax revenue because there's more customers in town to buy their product or buy their service. And especially after a COVID year that we had this past year with restricted business and stay at home things and all that, some of those businesses may be hurting. They may need those people coming. Football season is the peak for a lot of things around here. And so having those people coming into town to provide that is a benefit to the city. And then if you can get the process for the short-term rentals with the licensing and the tourist tax or bed tax. I've done short-term rentals before down at the beach, and I've done it from my house in Auburn. My wife and I did it for about 7 years, kind of how I got started in real estate, although the sales is much better. It's much more my passion for it, but still I appreciate, the things that I learned then, and, and how much the tax revenue was for the panhandle of Florida. Every place down there, I mean, tourism's like 90% of the economy. So I'm not saying Auburn's going to turn into this tourist economy, but still you got to take advantage of the benefit that we have here at Auburn University in that peak football season. And people, one reasons, or some of the reasons that I'm for the NC zones and the LDD and those that are not multifamily rated being able to have the option to do it in some form or fashion is, to me, they're set up best to do it because of the tax benefits and just being a short time. Everybody that I've seen comments on seems to be concerned about people doing it all year long. And I really just don't think, I really don't think that's going to be something that happens, because I think it's going to be the same amount of people that are doing it now, maybe even less, because it may be more of a challenge to, people may not want to fool with the hassle of the permitting and sales tax filing and all that stuff. Cause I've done that. It takes a while. It's a good bit of work. But people that own their home in those neighborhoods, they could rent their homes for 14 days or less and not pay any federal income tax. So, I mean, you kind of have a built-in rental restriction already without even putting a number on it, because if you're going to start doing it more than 14 days, it really may get to the point where the trouble's not worth the money. And so, that's one of the benefits. And a lot of people have said that there's plenty of rentals in the other multifamily related zones. And I don't think that's the case. I don't have the numbers on that. I'm just going off my experience looking at those types of properties there, but they're mostly condos, townhomes, and apartments. And those are typically long-term leases. You cannot make your rental numbers work on just doing short-term rental. Maybe if you bought the property 20 years ago and your basis is really low, you could. But if you're paying, the prices that things around campus are going for now, I can tell you, you're not going to be able to cover your costs, and you're certainly not going to make any money, and you're going to be working so hard to keep the thing full but you're going to be losing money on it. It doesn't make financial sense for those people to do it. So my point is if we get rid of the NC zone rentals, we're still probably going to actually lose more rentals than just them, because most of those types of properties aren't going to do the short term. It's just the monetary value is just not there. The NC zone is set up perfect for it. Again, with some type of regulation, obviously nobody wants bad renters, and no neighbors wants bad renters. And I do want to share before I go, because I know I've talked a lot, but I've got a neighbor that lives they have a house that's 2 doors down from me. I mean, really close cul-de-sac. They've done short-term rentals for a while, like I think 2 years at least. We have never had a problem with noise from that house or anything. No, things that I hear, I didn't even know anybody was over there. And so I just want, and I've got some friends that have done it too in different NC neighborhoods. They've never had any problems. And I just feel like some of the complaints from people, while they have valid points, and I don't want to diminish their opinions on it, but I feel like some of it's a little bit embellished. I mean, the traffic comes into town because of the games, not because somebody's renting somebody's house. I mean, I'll drive in a neighborhood now showing property, and I've got cars parked all along down the street, and it's just a normal weekend. People are coming over. So, some of the things I feel like maybe the complaints are valid, but a lot of them I think are a little bit embellished, like it's just going to turn into some spread out hotel and all that. I really don't think there's going to be that much net effect. I don't think we're going to have just a ton of these rentals. I think you're going to have the people that have done it before keep doing it. Maybe a few of them drop out because they want to fool with the other stuff. I just don't think you're not going to have people buying properties just to do that. I mean, they can already do it now. Everybody's been doing it. I got a buddy that's been doing it for 10 years and he lives in an NC zone. And, you know, so I mean, they're going to continue to do it. I think you need to take advantage of it, regulate it, collect the money, the permitting. But, you know, mainly try to think of a way to keep these people coming into town to help stimulate and continue to help our economy thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Sharon Askew. Sharon Askew.
Still got mute on.
Huh?
Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is Ray instead of Sharon.
Oh, okay, that'll work. Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
My name is Ray Askew. I live at 548 Hurd Avenue. I've been in Auburn since 1960 and bought my house that I live in now in 1964. It's been a long time. I was the youngest family on the block when I moved here, and I'm now the senior family on the block. The neighborhood consists of houses built by Jack Bailey in his first subdivision. The gentleman spoke about Jack's construction and his philosophy earlier. In recent years, over time, houses have begun to sell and some have turned into rental. But one of the unique things we find about rental houses is that you can sustain a neighborhood philosophy, a real neighborhood, by people interacting with one another, whether they are owner occupied or rental property, as long as the rental property is maintained. One of the things that doesn't happen with short-term rentals is that the people who come in aren't here long-term. They do not develop as neighbors, and that property doesn't develop as neighbors. Maybe it does for the owner, but it is not a neighbor property on the weekends when it's occupied by 6 or 8 people who have an isolated view or an isolated intent. In any event, in February, the amendment that was offered to the Planning Commission's proposed ordinance basically removed what I call the cover for the NC zone from commercialization. What concerns me is that when you remove the cover that exists in the ordinance, the current ordinance for the zoning of NC, and for that matter, from my point of view, should cover all family housing neighborhoods. You remove that cover and you in essence have opened a Pandora's box for any commercialization. While one may argue, well, it won't open the box for bars, but I'm not sure the city could in fact show any basis in the NC zone for limiting any kind of commercialization, except under some conditions of health, that sort of thing. So it does seem to me that opening up the NC zones to any kind of essentially unbounded commercialization under the addition to the ordinance, the amendment to the ordinance, there is no limit, not only how many people can be there in a given short-term rental, but how many short-term rentals there can be within a neighborhood. It is basically a commercialization step. And to me, it's a slippery slope to what the next commercialization would be. And I'd like to say something about the February council meeting, in that it was a disappointment to me, in that it is noteworthy that no information was presented by any council member following the proposal for the amendment. No one spoke about why the amendment was good, what it really was trying to address. There were some really very short statements made by a couple of council members, but nobody said we are putting this in because it addresses this problem, delineate the problem, and say, let's now discuss that. There was no discussion, no foundation, and that really disappointed me for the governing body to put forth legislation, particularly legislation that was replacing something that had been developed over 18 months. As the gentleman earlier said, a lot of people, a lot of work went into doing that. There was a lot of compromising after a lot of pressure on the Planning Commission. And I would make some changes to the Planning Commission, but I didn't go before them and argue to make those changes. And I think what we need to do now is to go to the Planning Commission proposal, understand that anything that's proposed will have flaws in it. But over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, gather some data on short-term rentals, where they are, how many there are, and understand the effect of short-term rentals in the areas where they are allowed. I just do not believe one should be rushing whole hog into turning the whole city into an open market for short-term rentals when nobody has shown a sound reason for it being that way. And secondly, to my knowledge, no one has done any kind of projected analysis on the potential downside to this kind of commercial activity in the city. I'm an old man. I've lived here for a long time. People tell me I have the opportunity to make a lot of money because I live in a large house, very close to the campus, many bedrooms. All I have to do is move out for a weekend and let people move in here without regard to the impact on my neighbors. Not the physical impact, but the emotional impact of big parties and things of that nature on a regular basis, especially in the fall. I believe that is harmful to my neighbors. And since they are my neighbors, I would not do that to them. So my other option is realtors have told me, you have a prime piece of real estate, sell it to me and get out and go live somewhere else. I'll give you a lot of money. I don't want to go somewhere else. While short-term rentals seems to be something new, actually it's not new. Hotels are short-term rentals and I've always been. This is just a distributed short-term rental concept. I don't feel that I should be put in a position by the governing body to either get on board and rent out my house, get on board and let my neighbor or somebody else rent out their houses, and be inundated with whatever the noise and distractions are from short-term rentals, or sell my house and go somewhere else. I don't think the council should be making that decision. So repeating, I would appreciate it if the council would in fact think long and hard about assessing short-term rentals over the next 2 or 3 years, gathering some factual data. There's just far too many things being said that are not backed up by data. In any event, I appreciate the time. Thanks again. Appreciate the job you're doing.
William Caskey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm dismayed at the
Address real quick, Mr. Caskey.
oh, sorry about that. Bill Caskey, 521 East Sanford.
Go ahead. Thank you.
That I'm dismayed at the seeming disregard of the task force, the planning department, and the planning commission. Their work, their findings, their recommendations. A lady mentioned earlier that there'd been 500 reach outs to the council. I think that number now is in excess of 1,000 people have reached out and signed petitions in opposition to short-term rentals in the NC zone and the other zones that are mentioned. This is not a citywide issue. This really only applies in the neighborhoods in proximity to campus and proximity to town. The folks in Moores Mill or East Lake or Grove Park or the neighborhoods north of the university, they don't care about this. It's not in their neighborhood. It is in these neighborhoods that are close to the city. And you know, several things have been mentioned that I would piggyback on. A gentleman mentioned that long-term rentals were not preferable to short-term rentals, and I would disagree. Across the street from me are 2 long-term rentals. One is a gentleman in medical school with his wife and 2 kids, a wonderful family. This is their 2nd year living there in a rental. The other is college students, it's young ladies, and they're wonderful neighbors. And prior to them, it was a gentleman and his girlfriend, also in medical school. Again, wonderful neighbors, because you get to know them. It's not the revolving door every weekend. Another gentleman at the very beginning mentioned that, well, it's just a side business. And you know what? He's right. It is a side business. It's a commercial enterprise. And commercial enterprises ought not be allowed in NC neighborhoods at all. And I agree with Mr. Askew and his comments of, once you open Pandora's box, how are you going to stop it? In the prior council meeting, people talked about, well, because of COVID, most everybody's working from home now. So you've already got commercial activities going on in your home. There's a real difference. You know, if I owned a Burger King, I could operate that Burger King from my home. But I couldn't operate the Burger King on my property because that would be a commercial enterprise. That's a major distinction. So these short-term rentals are hotels. They're just another word for hotels. People have talked about how much money they make operating their short-term rental. It's a commercial enterprise. It's a revolving door in a neighborhood that should not have to be subjected to that. When we look at our neighbors and the families and the sharing that goes on, that doesn't exist with the short-term rental. So I urge the council to rethink what I refer to as the ambush amendment that was foisted on them at the last meeting, and disregard that, vote to accept the proposal as the Planning Commission passed 7-2, as recommended by the Planning Department and with input from the task force. It was fair, it was well thought out, it captured the evidence or the information that was necessary to operate these short-term rentals in the areas where they are appropriate. They are not appropriate in the neighborhoods where they have previously been prevented, and we would hope that you would continue to protect these neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, William Lowry.
Good evening. I spoke at the last one, so I will be extremely brief on this one. But I did want to share a story that is so very Auburn.
Address, please. Sorry.
I'm sorry, 224 West Chewacla Drive.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Earlier this week, my neighbors pulled their truck up into their front lawn, lined it with plastic, filled it with water, and had a pool party. And then they had a rope swing that's been there for a while. And a couple of the guys actually did rope swing falls into the pool, which was honestly pretty funny for me to be able to watch while I'm working in my office and just looking out the window. I'm in an NC zone. I spoke last time and probably made a lot of people mad. The reality is that if we try and pass anything that says you cannot do this, it is not going to stick. The lawyers are going to get involved. Airbnb is going to get involved. They don't, and anybody that thinks that Auburn's not that big a market, it's the precedents. They're not going to allow the precedents to get set. So no regulation's perfect. I don't think what you're proposing is perfect, but it does provide some actual repercussions to bad renters. And there are definitely some bad renters on Payne Street that are also making Heard mad. I'm personally aware of that. We can stick it to them and shut that down once you actually have a regulation in place. And it's also a way to stop non-primary STRs. So everybody that's worried that, we're going to over-commercialize Payne Street and the surrounding area, well, you've got to live there for a certain number of days. If you want to increase that number of days, I think a lot of us would be just fine with that. I'm going to get off the stage by saying I don't think it's in the Auburn spirit to be inhospitable. And a lot of this is just not hospitable. I think the signs up "Don't Hotel My Neighborhood" are inhospitable to people that are visiting. But the thing that bothers me the most, and you can call it unchristian, or you can just call it, well, you can give it another name, but quote, "not in my backyard," is what we're talking about when we say that one neighborhood is better or different or deserves different rights than others. And I will never get behind that, even if I never make money off an STR again. Not in my backyard doesn't work for me as an American. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Connor Bailey.
Good evening, Connor Bailey, 323 Brookside Drive. The fundamental issue here, nobody's really addressed, it's one of property rights. Property rights are not some natural law that simply are. Property rights are things that we as a society, through political process, agree upon. And we have done that in the context of NC zones by saying you can only live there as a family with the addition of one unrelated person, no commercial enterprises. Someone alluded to a card that was distributed earlier. That states what the law is, and I look forward to a discussion at the very end of what in fact is the law. I understand that people who are engaging in STRs and homestays are in fact violating the law, violating fundamentally the property rights of their neighbors. I understand an individual who wants to make an investment in a home and uses rentals, short-term rentals, as a way of earning additional income. That's an understandable desire. On the other hand, the impact of that desire on neighbors, we have heard, of course, there are good renters, but there are also many cases where this has become a problem. And Susan Jones on Payne Street made that case, and others have as well. So what we have are the interest of a relatively small number of individuals who want to make some extra money as opposed to over 1,000 individuals who communicated with council saying no. Thank you very much.
We lost you, Mr. Bailey.
Did he mute himself?
I said, the last word I said was just say no. Be like Nancy Reagan. Just say no to short-term rentals and homestays in NC zones. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Poole has his name back up, but I want to make sure there's no one else who would like to talk first. Ms. Wright, would you like to talk? Thought I saw Ms. Wright's name pop up there. Did I not see it? Okay. All right, we'll go to Mr. Neely. William Neely. Mr. Neely, you with us?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you now.
Okay, fine. All right, so my name is Charles Neely. I live at 415 Hare Avenue. I've been there about 50 years. I know various of the people who've spoken here. The fact is that we keep dragging in things that are really not all that rational. One of them is that somehow, if we don't allow these short-term hotels in our neighborhood, we'll be sued about it, because that's a bad thing. Well, the fact is that there are zoning regulations. You can't build your house closer than a certain distance to the street. No one's going to sue over that. When people bought this property, it said very plainly in the zoning laws, you don't have a commercial operation. And there's no doubt about it, these short-term hotels are commercial operations. Now, it's true we use the word guest very freely, but these people are not guests, they're customers. They're selling them a place to stay. It's just a business. Now, some people are making money off of it, and I understand they desperately want to continue making money. Some people say that the city ought to be making money off of it. Well, probably they should, but maybe not on the backs of the people who live here. I went to the trouble to determine what the area was that is now zoned for allowing these short-term rentals, previously allowed, leaving out the NC. The change that was made amounted to about between 6 and 7 square miles of the city is available to put in these short-term hotels. Why you have to go to the neighborhood conservation district and destroy them to have a space for your hotel is a little difficult to swallow. You really don't understand why they want to do it, except that there's more money that way. You bought the land cheap or something like that. So I think that it's not rational to say we have to have it in the neighborhood conservation zone. You can have it in the other 6 or 7 square miles of the city where it is currently allowed before this last amendment came up. I just don't understand why we would do anything different. I hope you will drop this amendment, go back to what the Planning Commission proposed, and just go forward with that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Why don't we go to Miss Wright, since I think she was next and then we lost her. So Miss Margaret Wright.
She's muted. She's unmuted.
Yes, here I am. Okay.
We can hear you.
This is Margaret Wright, 500 Brookwood. The person who introduced the amendment said, we want to be fair to everyone. Well, 3 people that voted on the amendment live where there are covenants that prohibit this rental. They live in Moores Mill, Ashton Lakes, and Grove Hill. So is this really being fair when they don't have to do it? And my representative is not voting because since 2016, he's been violating the regulations that we have in place. You can go to Airbnb and see all the people that rent from him at $85 a night. And he's pretty well booked up. So it's commercial, and it's what he's doing is he's not following the regulations. And what the city tells me is it's a gray area. It's neither legal nor illegal rather. So the city needs to get that straight and stop people from doing things that are illegal. To me, neighborhood conservation is like a pretty young woman. And people are saying, let's use her to make some money. Let's don't do that. That's all.
Okay. Carolyn Smith. Ms. Smith, your microphone is currently muted. There you go. Ms. Smith, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Yep.
Okay, good. I'm Carolyn Smith at 420 Hare Avenue, and I've been to these meetings and I've spoken the last several meetings, and my position is the same. I own a home that I rent out on VRBO and Airbnb, and my position is that I hope that you vote to allow us to continue our inviting guests into our home. There's not much more that I can say that everybody else hasn't said. It's all been said. But I just have to tell you that I just did my taxes today, and owning my home is not a money-making proposition. It is so far from the truth, and I'm pretty sure that there's a fair amount of us that rely on that little bit of income that we get from our homes to help us pay for the home that we like to come and visit and stay in ourselves, because we like Auburn, because we like our neighborhood. That's why I own a home there. And the other thing that I want to say, because there's really nothing more to say, all these other people that have come before me, Josh Poole, Matt Laney, all those people have made impeccable arguments and have very smart things to say about their insights. Is that I'm aware that when my guests sign up to come to stay in my home on Airbnb, that they pay tax. And I understand that Airbnb, and I think it's VRBO does as well, but I'm not certain of that one, that they send that tax money to the city. And if the city is accepting this tax money, how can you do that? This is my question I really want an answer for. How can that happen if we are illegally are you then supporting an illegal, operation? It's kind of like, is it the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing? What's going on there? How can you accept those tax dollars and then tell us that we are being illegal? And if we are, how come I haven't been cited? That little bit just kind of gets me going, because it's been going on. I don't know if the number of people that will continue to, I don't think the number is necessarily going to increase. I think the number of people who do have homestays and short-term rentals, I think it's just we're already there. We're already doing it. Nothing is going to change in terms of those numbers, of course, unless you vote to stop them from happening. Anyway, I think the tax thing is an interesting aspect, and I would like to know what the council thinks of that. And thank you for your time. I appreciate being heard.
Thank you. Okay. Next is Linda Dean.
Actually, Carolyn Carr is here
Okay.
with me, and Carolyn's going to speak, and I might tag on after her. We'll just see about that. But Carolyn's going to speak first.
Okay. Ms. Carr.
Thank you. Carolyn Carr, 342 Payne Street. And I'm speaking president of the Payne Street and Pinedale and Hare Avenue neighborhood. A lot of people, by the way, have been talking about being in Auburn a long time. I'll go up against any of you. I moved here in 1948. I want to make very clear that our neighborhood supports the original proposed ordinance that came through the planning department and the planning commission. That would allow nothing in the neighborhood conservation zones in the way of STRs of any type or homestays and so forth. I can't say that I've talked to everyone in our neighborhood, but of all the many neighborhood residents with whom I have spoken, only one supports the amendment that was proposed at the February 16th meeting. Rather than rehash all of these problems that we have had with STRs in our neighborhood, such as the noise, the parking problems, the obscene graffiti, the screaming drunks, the profanity and all, about which my neighbors are all very concerned, and feeling that there's just been a loss of neighborhood feeling. And I'd like to briefly talk about why the folks in the neighborhood really are worried about where this could be going. And part of it is just feeling that the city has not really carefully clamped down on problems in the past. And so therefore, people are worried about where this could go. Most of you on the council were, I'm sure, not probably even in Auburn when we first began having some real problems on Payne Street. When a homeowner at the corner of Thatch and Payne rented out a home to too many girls. And when we asked the city to deal with this, he informed us that there was no problem because he had had all the girls adopt each other. And frankly, everybody was pretty shocked that an owner would do something like this. We wound up with the city, in fact, the city attorney did help us on this and wound up in a court case. I think it was one of the last ones Bobby Harper ever heard. And Judge Harper frankly told the fellow, if you ever come before me with anything like this again, I'll not only put you in jail, but under the jail, because you could be messing with people's inheritance and property rights and so forth. So this is the kind of thing that just came up in that context and really bothered the neighborhood that people would do something like that. More of the concern in as far as regulations in the zoning and so forth goes, more recent times, we had in the Auburn 2000 plan, and I know I've mentioned this to the council before, we were the only neighborhood in the city, in fact, Dr. Neely helped head all this up, to attend all the many meetings of the original Auburn 2000 plan. And we kept asking for protection of neighborhood conservation areas from high density developments. And you can read the Auburn 2000 plan, and it says there will be no high density developments next to neighborhood conservation, only medium density. However, if you go and look at 221 Armstrong, you will see that that is not a medium density development. And when they built it, they tore down Woodland Terrace, ripped out the trees that were the noise buffer between Woodland Terrace and Payne Street houses, overloaded the storm sewers, of course, which then collapsed underneath Dr. Jim Wall's front and side yards and so forth. The reason I'm mentioning this is there are people in the neighborhood, more than a few, that actually suspected that the city deliberately dallied in getting the regulations in place to prevent this type of thing that, you know, here came Auburn 2000, we're not going to have high density development, and then whammo, there it is right next to us. So you may say, oh, this is not an STR issue. What I'm wanting the council to understand is that the neighborhood felt then, and many people still feel, burned by the fact that the city did not do what it said it would do, did not follow through. And this leads people to be extremely skeptical about how the city would handle the whole STR issue with the homestays and how they would be regulated and the limits on the number of people and so forth. And I won't go again through all of that, but these are commercial ventures that we absolutely don't feel are appropriate for neighborhood conservation. That's not what it's zoned for. And quite frankly, I feel I have to respond to a couple of remarks that have been made already that I did not intend to, but someone referring to embellished complaints. I wish the gentleman lived on Hare Avenue or Payne Street and had to deal with some of the events that occurred, and he would know there's absolutely no embellishment, and that's why the police had to be called on more than one occasion. And I'm sorry to disagree with the lady who kept talking about my home on Hare Avenue, but the dear lady lives in California. Her residence is there. The house on Hare Avenue is not her home. And that house has been a major problem. So we would really like to see, as people have already said, that the original ordinance as proposed by the planning department and the planning commission be passed by this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Steen, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, and I know that people, a lot of people want to talk, but I would like to comment that the ordinance that was passed by the Planning Commission was thought through very carefully and was aligned with what was already existing in our city code. I'd like to reference the permitted use chart from the 4th chapter on zoning, page 7, where it lists what is permitted in NC as opposed to some of the other zones. And the Planning Commission was very careful about this. They deliberately excluded NC, DDH, MDRD, and LLRD from allowing homestays as well as short-term rentals because of the 5 unrelated rule. And if you look at that chart, and I hope anyone listening to this will go back to the zoning code and look at that chart, it very clearly shows no commercial uses in NC, DDH, MDRD, NRD, and LLRD. Those are the zones which excluded homestays and excluded short-term rentals specifically. So it was very carefully done, and it got thrown away by that amendment that was proposed February 16th. I also encourage the council to review, or anyone else listening to this, the definitions for some of these zones. For the commercial, we'll say comprehensive development district, for example, where short-term rentals and homestays will be allowed. It says, this district is intended to accommodate most of the growth expected in the undeveloped areas of Auburn. It will be provided with all public facilities, etc., and will allow most uses by right. It is intended to provide the zoning and capital improvements that attract development. It consists of the areas where development should logically locate as a consequence of planned public facilities and associated capital expenditures. The district provides regulations that permit development of both urban and suburban character. So bottom line is, yes, it does have single family residences, but it also has a lot of commercial development within that particular zone. Zones are different. That is the purpose for zoning regulations. They're different. Urban neighborhood south is not the same as urban neighborhood west. Urban neighborhood south has a building height regulation of either 35 or 45 feet max. Urban neighborhood west, I didn't look it back up again, but I think it's at least 75 feet is the building height. They differ in density. So our zones are different. You cannot say that all zones are the same or all zones can be treated the same equally. They're not the same. Here I am in NC. Boy, I could make a lot of money if I could throw up a big old tall apartment building, but I cannot do that. And I think that that type of understanding of the purpose of zoning regulations is key to this discussion. Neighborhood conservation means neighborhood conservation. It does not mean incremental commercialization. And thank you very much. I appreciate City Council. This is a very thorny issue. And I appreciate the time that has been on it by you guys, as well as the task force, as well as the Planning Commission. I think the Planning Commission's ordinance that was passed on January 25th should be approved tonight. And I agree with all of the comments that Ray Askew made on this. I can't say it as well as he did, but I'm in concurrence with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Bruno Ulrich. Bruno, we can't hear you.
You're on mute. Good evening. This is Bruno Ulrich. I reside in 1518 Stewart Circle, Auburn. I was a member of the task force, and I attended all the task force meetings. I attended all of the planning commission's meetings. So I'm going to be very brief because I've heard many or most or all the arguments thus far today. My only comment was early on, I had recommended that the homestay short-term rental ordinance be separated from the home occupation, simply because I didn't feel that it fit that definition. Let me read you a definition that will become very clear to you. A building or a portion of a building containing sleeping units which are occupied on a daily or short-term basis. That is the definition of a hotel. Now, what's the difference between a hotel and a homestay or a short-term rental? I'll leave that up to you. As far as the Planning Commission's recommendations, I fully endorse the October 5th presentation that was made by the Planning Department and accepted by the Planning Commission with one exception. I researched many parts of the country for the short-term rental ordinances. And what I was struck by was the majority of the communities across the country that had such an ordinance recommended or had in their ordinance that not unlimited number of guests can stay overnight, but rather 2 per bedroom. And that seems a reasonable solution to the problem. That's all I have for this evening. Many of you have read my letters to the editors, and I sent letters to the mayor and council, and so I need not say anymore. Good evening.
Thank you, Bruno. Okay. Next is David Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, manager, and council members. I've listened very carefully this evening to arguments in favor of allowing short-term rentals, homestays in neighborhood conservation zones. And it seems to be that there are 2.
Mr. Hill, what's your address, please? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. It's 370 East Thatch Avenue.
Okay. Thank you.
I've listened very carefully to the arguments made tonight by those who favor homestays in neighborhood conservation zones, and there seem to be two basic arguments. One is that some of these homeowners feel that they need additional income to be able to support their purchase of a home in a neighborhood conservation area, and feel that their neighbors should be tolerant of their need to be able to support them. Second is I've heard that Auburn's economy and tourism needs it, that our hotels and bars need us in neighborhood conservation areas to offer some of our homes so that tourism can move forward. I'd like to respond to those two specific arguments in two ways. One is, I believe there are a lot of hotels that are not being heard from. And, yes, there are game day weekends a few times a year, 5 or 6 times a year, where there might be a shortage of hotel rooms. But on a day in, day out basis, I know that there are local hotels that are not always full. I know just a few blocks from my home is a fine boutique hotel. A young couple came to Auburn, invested lots of money in building that hotel up and offering their services to the community and to visitors to Auburn. And I passed that hotel and I can see they're not full on many nights during the week. And when we allow commercialization of a neighborhood conservation zone, we're really allowing people to compete with that homegrown business. I'm also a believer in free markets. If we have a shortage of hotel rooms in the city of Auburn, I believe the market will respond to that, and we'll see Marriott and Hilton and the other chains build more hotel rooms to meet that demand. So I'm not really a fan of the argument that we need more hotel space and homestays are the answer. Really, in reality, I purchased a commercial real estate report on homestays in Auburn, and there, at best, there are 200 or 300 over the past year of these, and I don't really think those 200 to 300 operating intermittently are going to totally solve the problem on 5 or 6 game days a year. Secondly, I think it's very important that it is an offset to those 200 to 300 households that are looking for more income. We look at the impact on the home values, the property values of people whose properties will be devalued by having a homestay next door. What I would ask each council member to weigh is, would you yourself knowingly purchase a piece of property for your personal home where one night out of every 4, there could be strangers there renting out rooms as a hotel? I don't think we need an economist to tell us that, that's not good. I heard a realtor tonight. He said he has some people near him he has no concerns about. But I'm just telling you, most Americans, most Auburn residents, when given a choice to buy a piece of property where there is a homestay residence next door versus one that doesn't have it, would definitely choose where there's not a homestay. And so what we're doing is to satisfy the economic demands of 200 to 300 at most homeowners that need additional income through homestays. We're potentially sacrificing the property values of thousands of homeowners. Now, why is this important? There are many public goods in Lee County and Auburn that depend on high property values. Let me tell you, I have lived in Texas, and there they don't have zoning, and it plays havoc with property values, and that places havoc with tax revenues. And so I see that I feel like there's not been enough of discussion around what is the impact of homestays ultimately on property values. Finally, I just want to make a point that one thing that's discouraged me about all this, and I know there's many we're not hearing from tonight, many citizens that frankly don't have the resources and the wherewithal and the knowledge and the tech savvy to constantly be on Zoom calls trying to protect their neighborhood and their home from devaluation by 200 to 300 people that want to erode their property values so they can make a little more income on the side. I think that we need to think more about protecting citizens and the neighborhoods, and the conservation has been pointed out tonight of those neighborhoods, rather in the thousands of people in those neighborhoods, many of which can't be on this call tonight. And instead, we're being called to protect 200 to 300 people who need some more income. That's my end of my comment.
Thank you. Okay, would anybody else, Joshua, I'm not trying to give you the stiff arm. I just want to make sure that there's no one else who would like to speak before we come back to you. Anyone else that's with us tonight? Okay, Miss Megan Hack.
Actually, this is Jonathan Hawk, and Megan's my wife. We live at 365 Gardner. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for taking the time to do this. Just real quickly here at the end, I'd like to say that we've owned multiple homes in Texas and in Alabama. We've had vacation rentals in our personal homes, and we did have one in Texas that was a private, just a straight up rental. One thing I'd just like to say to the community is we've had really, really good experiences with the folks that have stayed with us. We do a good job. It doesn't fall into fair housing with traditional real estate, where you can actually, spend time to understand who's going to be staying in your home. And I know it's different for everybody, depending on what neighborhood you live in, and I get all that. We bought a house, 365 Gardner Drive, here in Auburn. That was a vacation rental before. We didn't even live here at the time, and we rented it out, and actually used the money to improve the property by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I know a lot of people say, well, it's just extra income and it's taken away from the neighborhood. But what about, the fact that we've, spent money to increase the property value of our neighborhood? I could argue that our house is one of the nicer ones on the street now. And that's, I wouldn't say solely focused on the fact that we were able to rent it out, but it helped. And just, to name drop a little bit, we had Sammy Coates, former football player, stay at our house for 3 months while he was here during spring practice or spring training or summer training. We've had British Open winners stay at our house. We've had CEOs of Fortune 500 companies stay at our house. It's not, people aren't going to stay at my house that aren't going to respect it and aren't going to respect our neighbors and take care of what's going on. So I know you guys have heard all this before. I just want to give you guys a positive story that comes out of vacation rentals, and it's not all about poking and gouging and getting every dollar out of it. And I will say this as well, to those that are concerned that it's going to be too big of a deal. It's hard work. It's a pain to move out of your house for a weekend. You have to get everything ready. It costs money to do so with, VRBO listings and everything else that comes along with it. It's not an easy undertaking. And the realtor that was on here before that mentioned, there's a federal law that you don't have to pay taxes if it's less than 14 days. It's not a big money grab like everybody thinks it is. And I think when people try it, they start to pull back and say, it's not for me because it's too much work. So just want to leave it at that. I want to say again, thank you to the council for taking a look at it. We use it sparingly. It's been a success for us, and it's been a success for our neighborhood, and it's been able to increase our property value.
Thank you.
Martha Thomas, please.
All right. Martha Thomas, did you want to speak? I saw your hand raised and then it disappeared. Ms. Thomas?
Okay, do you hear me now?
We can. Okay, I didn't know we clicked on you. Okay, you're up. Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, I agree with what David Hill said. That was a wonderful talk that he gave and explained a whole lot about what's going on. I also want to say that a lot of people have been doing things that are illegal on Gardner Drive. That is neighborhood conservation, no more than two unrelated people. And these short-term rentals have gone in and have been being run illegally. You have been doing something illegal. That is wrong. And so I agree with David Hill. Please vote for the ordinance that was carefully crafted by the planning department and voted upon 7-2 by the planning commission. Please, please pass that ordinance.
Ms. Thomas, what's your address, please?
It's 226 Marion Circle, Auburn, Alabama.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Josh Poole, we'll come back to you.
Hey, y'all. Again, Josh Poole, 334 Hickory Woods Drive. I appreciate you circling back around to me. I know some people are probably frustrated with listening to all these people blabber about, and so I appreciate you giving me another circle around. There was just a couple points I wanted to make that I completely forgot to last time. One of those is that I hear a lot of people saying that this doesn't help the city. Well, this helps the city threefold. You get tax money from these platforms going to the city. You get money, even if it's just a little bit, going into the pockets of the property owners that's then reinvested into the city. And then the people that are staying in those properties are then directly investing their money into the community. So the city is benefiting from this threefold. But one of the two other points I have, one of them is not really off topic, but it's specifically in these zones, the city's definition of a family. And personally, I think the zone's restrictions on what they deem as a traditional family, quote unquote, in a dwelling is pretty insensitive, dated, and non-inclusive. What about those people that have no immediate family, but have maybe extended family or consider their close friends or non-blood related people as their family? Or what about families who chose not to enter into traditional union? So you can have unblood related people living together, but apparently they're breaking the rules of these zones. And so maybe this is a job for the diversity and inclusion task force, but I think that, that plays into these short-term rentals and how you're defining it by family. Well, we need to look at the definition of family. And finally, I just want to remind you guys and circle back around to one of my original questions about have these been operating illegally in these zones, and then what are the potential repercussions? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, all right, Ms. Dean, we'll come back to you.
I'm not going to be long-winded, so don't worry. I did want to remind you all of the question I believe Mr. Townsend posed about the postcard that was sent out and the 180-day question about that 180-day required rental on that postcard. So I think you all said you would answer questions at the end of this discussion. So I'm just looping back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else? Okay, at this time I will close the public hearing. With the council's permission, I'd like for us to take a 5-minute break. It is 9:18. We'll come back at 9:23. Okay, thank you. Everybody ready?
Let's see who's back though. I'm gonna wait for everybody to come in. We don't have Jay back yet.
We don't have Jay back. Okay. All right, thank you everybody for the break, and we will begin our meeting at this point in time. We have closed the public hearing, so do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I do plan to offer an amendment, but before I do that, I would like to read a statement. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody that's worked so hard on this effort for so many years. The task force, the planning staff, the planning commission, the city council, and our citizens here in Auburn. I want to thank every one of you for sending your emails, your phone calls, your texts over the last 4 weeks in particular, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And I want to particularly thank all of those people that I've had a personal opportunity to visit with, to share coffee with, to spend time with over the last month and listen to your thoughts about this topic. Here's my statement. Over the last several years, and particularly the last 4 weeks, many of you have spoken and I've tried to listen. Some of you have reminded me of the months-long discussion held in 1984 when neighborhood conservation districts were created and subsequent promises of elected officials always to protect single-family neighborhoods zoned NC. Over the years, successive city councils have adhered to this commitment to protect neighborhood conservation neighborhoods. I appreciate that commitment and pledge to do my best to adhere to it as well. The city council has wrestled mightily over this issue for the past 2 years. I appointed a task force to study the issues. The planning staff has spent hours researching and discussing how best for Auburn to address this issue, and the planning commission recommended a path forward. I believe strongly that the tough issues that face our community need to be thoroughly aired, and this one has certainly been discussed in great detail. We as a community have demonstrated that we can keep these discussions on a high level with respect for everyone's opinion without resorting to personal attack. While I believe that the homestay amendment that was made on February the 16th was a win-win for everyone, I now believe that that is not the right path for our community. I'm a strong believer in the sanctity of our neighborhoods, and I know that the NC zoning designation is the best protection all of us have for our homes, which are clearly most of our family's greatest investment. I want to stress that I strongly support all members of our council's right to propose amendments through the process we have established to create and change policy. Through this process, all of Auburn citizens are invited to react to proposals by letting your elected representatives know of your opinions. You have clearly done that. I conclude by pointing out that I've listened to all sides on this issue, and I feel that citizens' confidence in the stability and the integrity of the NC and other neighborhoods is of paramount importance and must be recognized. I therefore will vote to support homestays only in certain districts as recommended by the Planning Commission. At this time, I'd like to read my amendment that I'd like to offer. I move to amend Article 5, Detailed Use Regulations, Section 511.04B, Detailed Use Regulations, Home Occupations, General Regulations. In addition to the provisions above, the following regulations shall only apply to homestays. Homestays by returning this section to the original Planning Commission recommendation by removing Neighborhood Conservation District, Limited Development District, Development District Housing, and Large Lot Residential District as zoning districts where homestays would be allowed. Okay. All right. I know that was complicated. That was a lot of legal city municipal jargon there, so we can get into what that means.
Second.
But I've offered that amendment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Have a motion and a second on this amendment. Now discussion.
One point of clarification, Mayor.
Sure.
It's just because it doesn't read this way. There was an asterisk in the previous version removed after, and I can put up on the screen, the entire council was forwarded this potential amendment this afternoon at the request of the mayor. There should be an asterisk added after CRDW, an asterisk added after the initials NRD, and a statement at the end with an asterisk saying east of North Donahue. That has to do with the corridor redevelopment districts west. That side east of Donahue would be permissive, and then also the neighborhood redevelopment east of Donahue would be permissive in this. This is returning it exactly to the language that Planning Commission offered.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Are we going to answer the questions that the people asked?
Sure, Chief. Right now, the discussion is on the amendment, but yes, we will get to those couple of questions, which are really kind of the same question a little bit later in the discussion.
You've got to discuss the amendment first, and if you want to get to the greater ordinance, once you're done with any amending, that would be in order to discuss them at that time once you get past amendments.
Thank you. And also, just to make it very clear, the mayor's amendment that he's offering takes this thing back like it was, like the Planning Commission recommended.
That's exactly right, Tommy.
That's correct. And that's why I added, if the mayor was willing to concede that the asterisk needs to be added in a few locations, and I'm happy to put this up on the screen if the council would like to view it. I know some of you have it in front of you, but we can show it right now if that is your preference.
So if we pass it with this, like this, the NC zone neighborhoods are protected.
Correct.
Yes.
NC, LDD, Neighborhood Conservation Limited Development District, Development District Housing and Large Lot Residential. And then basically it's corridor redevelopment in certain parts, and neighborhood redevelopment in certain parts are also protected on the west side.
I feel like I can support what the mayor has offered, but I will say this. I think all the residents and all the citizens that contacted me, you made this an easy decision for me, because it's overwhelmingly in favor of keeping this out of the NC neighborhoods. And I think it's what we owe it to our constituents to try to do what the majority of them want. And I think it was overwhelming. So I thank you for stepping up and letting us know how you felt. And I encourage you to do more of this in the future.
Any other discussion, comments?
Do we have to republish this if we adopt this amendment?
No, I checked with the city attorney. He can turn his camera on and verify that for you, but that is something that I have already thoroughly vetted with the city attorney, and I do not believe that will be required. And Rick can explain why.
Thank you, City Manager and Mayor. Because we had published previously, not only the council, but the citizens have had notice of the exact amendment now, which was the original ordinance 2 meetings ago. So we've met the publication and notice requirements that are state law, and you can proceed tonight should you choose to pass the mayor's amendment to that would complete the notice requirements, and then you just have to advertise it thereafter for it to become the amended ordinance in our zoning regs.
What he means by advertising is we publish all ordinances as required by law, and that's what he means by advertising it should you adopt an ordinance tonight.
And this returns back, besides I guess this would return back, except for the 3 or 4 other clauses that Ms. Whitten had proposed at the last meeting. Do we have is there a map that you could put up that we can see kind of geographically, put a visual as to where this would affect?
Yes, just give me a second here. See if I can locate it. It's not offering that as one I can share. Here we go. See if I can get this to where you can see the whole city. So the area is green. This is the map that was used with the original Planning Commission proposal from January 25th that they recommended to you and was considered at February 16th meeting. The green areas, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, are where it would be permissive if this amendment is voted affirmative by this council. And then again, considered in the overall adoption. If the ordinance is adopted as the current amendment is proposed, the green areas are where you can have short-term rentals and the gray areas are where you cannot. And this is identical to what the Planning Commission considered and discussed even back in October.
And if this goes back to the Planning Commission, we've kind of touched on it. I know that there's, we've kind of mentioned NC zoning. It's been focused on zoning, but I'm more, as you can see on the map, Ward 4 is a lot of green compared to the rest of the wards in the city. What was the Planning Commission's, how did they differentiate when we've got like neighborhoods just in different zones? You drive your car from one street to the other, the neighborhoods would look exactly the same, but they may be in different zones. What was the reasoning behind, it's permissive or allowed or okay in this particular neighborhood, same look, same setup, single family lots, but not in this adjoining neighborhood with it looks exactly the same, people cherish their homes the same, feel the same way. What was the reasoning was there a reasoning why that was differentiated?
And I listened into most of those meetings. I'll have the acting planning director add to this if I missed anything, but the gist of it was, and after, I think like a lot of citizens described tonight, much deliberation by the Planning Commission, this tracks exactly with the zones that allow up to 5 unrelated people in the base zone to live together. This would be permissive. And for the base zones that allow only up to 2 unrelated people to live together, short-term rentals would not be permitted. That is basically where the lines were drawn because that's an existing definition that is utilized for rental properties and how we enforce unrelated occupancy. And that is how Planning Commission recommended as a starting point. I think what they didn't want to do and something that I heard clearly from them in the meetings is they didn't want to pick and choose which neighborhoods just for a neighborhood, or what if a neighborhood wasn't represented at their meeting and couldn't say they wanted to be in or out. So they chose it strictly based on tracking with the family definition as a starting point to place an ordinance on the books to address short-term rentals, which we currently don't have any such ordinance right now. Katie, did I miss anything?
That's it exactly.
Is it fair to say the basis was there was concern that there would be an additional nuisance? And I know that's, I've repeated in emails, trash, traffic, safety. I know we got emails today regarding child exploitation. I know I've seen a human trafficking email about what short-term rentals. Was that kind of the gist of why we kept it out of NC?
No, I think the gist was it was tracking with family definition, and it was tracking back to one of the planning commissioners was on the Planning Commission at the time, and the current zoning ordinance was adopted in its form when we went to performance zoning. And as you heard tonight, there are a number of people that have lived in their homes since prior to that zoning ordinance being adopted, and they were really I guess there was a lot of public discussion, and the council at the time made it very clear, and subsequent councils have made it clear that they would protect neighborhood conservation zones from encroachment of commercial and or multifamily uses. And so part of the basis for that is one of the planning commissioners really gave a background on that. I can't climb in their heads as to why all the other reasons, of course, nuisance, trash, all those other things have always been at issue the entire time short-term rentals have been discussed in this format.
Well, and the reason I say that is because I'm in a unique situation where we're taking a look at a proposed ordinance and we're saying we don't, regarding ownership of the home and limiting association and a lot of fundamental issues, and saying in this particular neighborhood, we don't want it. but it's okay in this particular neighborhood, even though the neighborhoods are very similar in like and characteristic, and we want to provide unique and similar services. We had mentioned about the home occupation, and I know that's been brought up too. Megan, you had said something at another meeting. Is the idea that a homestay violates that unrelated occupancy, or is there something that differentiates that?
No, it's differentiated. It will not violate the home occupancy, and it goes back, and the city attorney will correct me if I'm wrong. In part, it also goes back to your intent to reside. Rick, do you want to further discuss that?
Certainly. You in a nutshell, when you go and stay in a hotel, you don't change your intent to reside in your normal place of abode, which would be your house. Just in this case of a short-term rental, if someone's coming to town for 3 days from Knoxville, Tennessee, their abode and their normal place of residence is still Knoxville. So they haven't changed their residence. So there aren't 3 people occupying that home, more than 3 unrelated occupying that home that would violate the current definition.
So the related occupancy hinges on residence. If you're setting up residence, it doesn't.
If you have a toothbrush and you get mail there, then that is an indication in case law that you intend to reside there, and you've made an effort, and there's clear evidence of your intent to make that your residence. You pay water bill there. So our students who have 5 people living in a place that's prohibited, we go and find evidence of those types of items, then they have violated the unrelated occupancy portion of our zoning ordinance, which is wholly different and unrelated to a homestay or a VRBO or STR, where someone is staying for 3 days or 10 days, and then they go back home to the place where they pay their water bill and have their toothbrush and their medicine in their medicine cabinet.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
One other, and I'm sorry, I'm taking a bunch of time up, but I do have, it's important because anyway, talking about commercial use in NC zoning and other zones. I know you've answered this before, Megan. We have commercial use currently in all zones in the city. Is that correct? In homes in the city?
Yeah, you have home occupations allowed unilaterally through the city. It depends on how people define commercial use. And a citizen earlier read from the table of permitted uses. That was absolutely accurate as to what that is, but that's for uses as the primary use to the property, as in you build a commercial building for a commercial enterprise. We have a lot of people who run a home-based business. They sell makeup. They have a home office where they're a day trader. They do a number of things, and they do it from the home. And so there is some commercial enterprise, but it is somewhat limited other than home daycares. And this is one of the things we discussed in your study session in February. Home daycares are allowed in neighborhoods throughout the city with certain parameters being met. And some people could call that a commercial enterprise. But again, I don't want to get into semantics of it. I think the intent of what some people are saying is you're not going to put a mini mart in an NC neighborhood. That's not allowed in the zoning ordinance, and that's accurate. A home office or a home business, you have a plumbing company, and one employee drives in the morning, parks his car in your driveway, and you ride together and go do plumbing work on people's houses. That's allowable. And you can't advertise it. You can't do other things. You can advertise the business, but you can't advertise a business address in that regard. But that's allowable even in an NC neighborhood.
And one of the things, and I'll shut up. I'm sorry. I may have some more questions, but conforming use. I know that's been brought up a lot in a lot of emails. What does that mean when you've got conforming use? I know that's not synonymous exactly. Conforming use is typically about building and zoning, and it's different than this. But conforming to the area, what would that mean?
Well, in a straight zoning sense, a conforming use is something that conforms with the zoning ordinance, and a non-conforming use is a use that was established prior to the zoning regulating it. But conforming, I don't know, Brett, exactly what people are referring to, unless they mean conforming with what's already existing in the neighborhood, which are single family detached houses that mainly permanent residents live in with a few long-term renters. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, would a mechanic shop or limited lodging be more conforming to a residential area? I mean, I think that's kind of the point that's been, like, you don't want to put a mechanic shop, you don't want to put an auto repair shop, but is lodging in that sense more conforming to what you do in a single family residential?
I think that's for you guys to decide.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've just heard that a lot, and I was wanting to.
No, those are good questions. They were all good questions, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments and/or questions?
Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
I wonder if the acting planning director could has at her disposal the original map recommended by the short-term rental task force to get a clearer picture of the intent of the task force placement of STRs in the city.
We do not have that at our fingertips.
Okay.
And Katie, unless you've got it pulled up somewhere.
I do not, and it would take me a few minutes to find it.
Yeah. Not something we've got readily available.
I bring that up just to provide a background from my experience on the task force. In the early stages of this, when we provided a recommended map, we had most of the green area in the urban core and along some of the corridor on Opelika Road. And I think the intent back in the days of the task force also wanted to include the family designation of up to 5. So we recognized all the family designations at the time of our recommendations, and it would have been prohibited under our recommendations to be anywhere in family occupancy zones from 2 to 5. And the map that we're looking at now evolved as, I guess you could call it a compromise through the Planning Commission deliberating over a number of their workshops. I just wanted to add that little detail of the evolution of what we're looking at here.
Thanks, Mr. Parsons. Anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, Ron.
So,
I'll chime in. Glad to see us perhaps come to or I don't guess perhaps, but come to a resolution tonight after quite a bit of conversation and deliberation. And I too want to acknowledge all the phone calls and emails that I know we all have received in the last month or so. And I've had a lot of good, earnest conversations. Some a little more friendly than others, but I suppose that's the nature of such a personal issue. I promise I understand the concern, of everybody that wants to protect their neighborhood, any neighborhood, and I'm right there with you and couldn't agree more. But I contend that short-term rentals isn't necessarily the evil neighbor that some have, like I say, portrayed, and especially homestays. Your problem isn't short-term rentals; it's bad neighbors, and you're going to get that in any neighborhood. I promise you can find them in mine, just like anybody else's. I do support some sort of resolution of an ordinance tonight. I can't support this amendment. I do want to see homestays throughout the city, and I think that I haven't heard a single person in this conversation want to end all rentals in general in neighborhood conservation, and it boils down to that. And I've said it in previous meetings. You can't. I can't differentiate in my heart. A long-term 6-month rental and a homestay in particular, as far as a good and decent neighbor. I think most of your problematic short-term situations are from non-homestays or your non-primary residents. And so I do still stand by the amendment that would allow homestays in the city. A commercial enterprise, we're splitting hairs you know, if we're going to call a short-term rental or a homestay, these temporary homestay rentals a commercial enterprise, why isn't a 1 month, a 1 year lease considered a commercial enterprise? You know, I contend it's just as much a commercial enterprise. So, you know, I don't, I appreciate the notion and everyone's concern, but I can't step aside from I still compare the long-term rents to the homestays. So I'm looking forward to getting some sort of finality to this tonight, but I can't support this amendment.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else? Okay, so right now we have a motion and a second on the amendment, right, Megan?
On the amendment, yep.
Okay, so a motion and a second on the amendment, and then we will vote. The vote would be just on the amendment, correct?
Correct, and do a roll call vote just to be clear.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote, and you're voting on just the amendment, okay? All right, so yes is for the amendment, no is against the amendment, correct, Megan?
Correct.
Okay, all right, Lindsay?
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Hovey,
No, ma'am.
Parsons. Parsons,
He's trying to get off mute. Give him a second here.
We can't hear you, Bob.
There we go.
yes.
Bob, we still didn't hear you. Hold on.
We didn't hear you. Hold on.
Yes.
Okay.
Smith,
No, ma'am.
Taylor,
Working on it.
Yes.
Witten,
No.
Anders,
Yes.
All right, that's 5-3.
Pass it.
The amendment is adopted. And now, Mayor, from a procedural standpoint, are there any other amendments before you
Yes.
get to the main motion?
So there were a couple of other amendments that were sent to us this afternoon. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve either one of those amendments? Okay. So we'll move this to a meeting, Megan, later on down the
Yeah,
road.
the amendments, just for clarification purposes, are just some housekeeping things that need to be done with regard to some homestay language in the zoning ordinance that can be corrected by going back to the planning commission in May, and that would be on your second meeting in June agenda. If you're not ready to address those tonight, that certainly isn't a problem, and we'll bring those back at a later date. So now, Mayor, you're just dealing with any discussion regarding the main motion as amended.
Okay. Do we need to have another motion for that?
No, the motion's on the table. You're in discussion.
Okay, so we're still. in
Anything
discussion.
you wanted to handle in discussion about the greater ordinance?
Okay, so if we want to talk about the greater ordinance in general, discussion on that, is there any thoughts or comments on the ordinance as a whole? So in just a minute, we'll be voting on the ordinance that we have just amended, okay? Any questions? Anybody know what we're doing?
If we could have a discussion based on some of the input from the public.
Sure. So, Ms. Crouch, we had a couple of questions that were evolved around the legality of short-term rentals today in the past. And there was a couple of things about the postcard that was sent a number of years ago. Could you just comment on that in general?
Yeah, as I've indicated at your work session in February, and we talked a lot about at the February 16th meeting, I'll have the city attorney weigh in. It's a very difficult question for our citizens. I've talked to a few people on the phone over the last few weeks about the legality of short-term rentals, and there's a lot of frustration, and that's why an ordinance is before you tonight. It's a very hard statement to make to somebody when you say they're neither legal nor illegal. They fall in an extreme gray area, and that's why you have 300 or so operating in the city right now. And that's why you're looking at parameters tonight. I'll have the city attorney hit on the only two items that can really even be looked at from an enforcement perspective without an ordinance in place. And that is, you've already talked, Councilman Smith asked some questions about unrelated occupancy. That would be the zoning ordinance way that we could enforce it. and why we're not doing that. And we talked a little bit about intent to reside, but I'll have the city attorney address that further. And that runs in tandem with the business license ordinance. When we don't have a defined use of a short-term rental, we don't have a business license ordinance that addresses short-term rentals. It's very hard to enforce an ordinance that doesn't exist from a business licensing perspective. And so I'll have the city attorney address why that is, because one of our challenges is we have to cite people for violating a specific section of a city law, and then we have to turn around and prosecute them for that. So that is why this is more challenging and falls in the gray area. Rick?
Thank you. Again, going back to the idea that the current zoning ordinance does not permit or prohibit the short-term rental as we have now all come to understand it. So when you go to prosecute someone under that definition of more than so many number of people unrelated as occupants, you run back into the definition of what someone's intent is when they are residing or occupying that space. And again, it goes back to the fact that if someone is here for 3 or 4 days and leaves, we're not going to have evidence that they intended to reside there and make that their abode and usual place of abode. So there's nothing for us to enforce with regard to that aspect of the definition. You also have heard a lot of discussion about the proposal of an STR being a commercial use. And I want to make it clear that in my mind, and when I hear that, I think, sure, it's a commercial use because somebody's charging money for someone to stay there. But the Supreme Court of Alabama disagrees. And what the Supreme Court of Alabama has said in a 2012 opinion is that when someone is basically using the home to sleep, eat, and gather there, just like I do when I own it, that doesn't make the use commercial. It just means it's being used consistent with someone living there, eating there, and sleeping there. So that activity in and of itself would not be, quote, commercial. So we can't cite somebody for using the home in this manner and then declaring it commercial. What has been discussed previously and just a few minutes ago would be an operation of a ongoing retail enterprise out of someone's home, and that would be commercial. And getting back to the question about the taxes and what's been received previously or paid to the city, VRBO and Airbnb are in the commercial rental business. They have to pay taxes when they derive income from that function, but they don't own the home, and they're the ones who want to do business in Auburn, so they voluntarily remit those payments, and we're going to accept them, but we do not have the ability at this point to cite an individual homeowner if they don't remit those taxes. So the fact that the council is legislating in this area and putting definitions in place that then allow us to collect taxes and regulate the activities as the council sees fit, we then have the ability to enforce an ordinance that addresses all of these concerns. The last thing that I was asked to speak about was the postcard that was sent, I guess maybe I don't know the time frame it was sent. It was a reference tonight.
It was sent around August of 2017.
Correct. And I believe at that time the discussion was related and to try and provide notice to those persons who were using their homes or properties to rent to long-term, but to more than the number of unrelated persons as allowed. And that was a reminder. And unfortunately and regretfully, the word prohibited was used in reference to rentals of less than 180 days or 90 days, I believe. I don't have the postcard in front of me. And more, I think, appropriate would have been that it's not permitted, nor is it prohibited, but it was an intent to try to get the residents or the owners to understand that there are certain things that were prohibited at the time. Unfortunately, the definition for that less than 180-day rental was not accurately related in that postcard.
Not from a city ordinance perspective, but the state requires you pay lodging taxes under 180 days. And that's also why the word prohibited was used. While I was not involved, I worked in the economic development department at the time and was not in this role as city manager. I researched heavily with the finance department and the planning department as what the intent of those postcards was. And that's exactly what the city attorney said. And the 180 days also related directly to state law with lodging taxes, and you are to remit them to the state regardless of what you're doing with the city. And that's an entirely separate issue, but part of the reason that was placed in there. And as discussed at your work sessions about this, and we covered this again on the 16th. I mean, yes, there were many attempts by the city, at the request of the council. That 2017 postcard went out at the request of the council at that time. Not the exact wording, but please do something about this. We're getting information, was to continue to remind people to please not do this because we're getting some complaints. We sent out a number of postcards over the years and a number of open line articles where we're also directly addressing unrelated occupancy, which we've my entire career received numerous complaints about. So that is addressing the postcard item. I don't know if you had any others that you needed staff to answer.
I think that covers it. Thank y'all very much. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Thank you, Megan. Great job. All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, so Megan, now we need to have a roll call for the ordinance.
I want to speak if no one else wants to.
Sure, go ahead, Brett.
I want to talk to all of council about this. Following this conversation and learning that, this was tied to the unrelated occupancy, and that's not necessarily not illegal for folks to do this. I just want each of you as council members to understand, especially in my ward, if you accept the position that this is a nuisance and that this is a problem for some neighborhoods, but you're going to vote for it in other neighborhoods, you're treating these like neighborhoods unequal. You're saying one gets preferential treatment while the other doesn't. I cannot support, that's why I could not support the amendment. I can't support the ordinance. I'm not even getting into the grounds of the legitimacy of short-term rentals and whether it's a good policy. I just cannot imagine individual homeowners. You drive through these neighborhoods on these roads and you're in one neighborhood and you say, we're going to take care of you, but for these reasons, but we're not going to do the next neighborhood over. I don't know that that's the way we should be treating our citizens. I think that's bad public policy. I just ask the council to consider that. I know that we're looking at NC and we're going to, for certain reasons and but there's other neighborhoods. I'm not talking multifamily living. I'm talking single family neighborhoods that if you accept the proposition that this is destructive and this is a safety issue and you pass this ordinance, you're saying I'm willing to accept those destructive policies in certain areas of the town and to certain neighborhoods and to certain families, but not others. And I just cannot support that type of public policy.
I understand, Brett. It's certainly something worth continuing to discuss, and I appreciate you defending those people in Ward 4 like you're doing right now. So kudos to you, and I think it's a conversation we need to continue to have.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your passion. Anyone else?
I would like to say, go ahead.
No, you're up, Beth. You got it.
I debated heavily on whether to even say a word this evening because I've been completely appalled by the way our citizenry and our council has acted through this whole process. And, we've all been in receipt of countless emails, and many have been respectful, but also many have been very disrespectful. And just hearing the conversation through the public hearing tonight, it echoes this sentiment of elitism, that we are this community that doesn't want that in our neighborhoods, and we don't want this to impact us. And to say that a like use of having people visit your home, if you've had people from your own friend group come and visit your home, then in essence, you violated the unrelated occupancy if you are using that as your argument. So if you've had college friends come and visit for a game day weekend, or if you've rented out your driveway in your front yard because you live in proximity to the university to pay, for parking for game day, then you've entered into commercial activity. And the hypocrisy that we have heard over the last months it's really dumbfounding to me. And I have heard and I have read every single email, and I've had countless phone calls, and I have spent over 100 hours. I've attended the task force meetings. I've attended the planning commission work sessions. I've listened to their meetings. We've had our own work sessions. I've researched multiple municipalities across this country. I've looked at case law, and to suggest that the amendments that I put forth on February 16th were somehow unethical, irresponsible, derogatory, or degrading to this community is simply false. And I really, like I said, I debated to say a word, but I just believe that it has to be spoken to, and that the equality that we are ignoring, and Councilperson Smith spoke eloquently on that, to say that those who live in one neighborhood deserve preferential treatment over another. Yes, we have zoning laws, but let's not forget that NC neighborhoods, neighborhood conservation speaks to setbacks. And if that's hard to hear, I'm sorry. But that's what it speaks to. And I just, I think we have a long way to go as regard to short-term rentals. This is not going anywhere. And I think people are going to recognize that even what we pass, if we pass anything this evening, is going to be almost impossible to regulate. And what will come forth in the years to come will be interesting to see. But 200 to 300 homes, as alluded by one of the public hearing constituents, 200 to 300 homes, that's what we're talking about. 200 to 300 homes at the height of its activity has divided this city. And we need to be focused on things that are really impacting the city, like crime and traffic and water and trash and other things. And I'm not going to sit back and just let the countless disrespectful emails that we have received go unspoken to, because it's been divisive, it's been ugly. We act like we are just the most elite community in this country, and we should all embrace each other in our differences, and we should embrace each other in our diversity. And we have not shown that through this process, and it's embarrassing. And I think it needed to be mentioned. And I appreciate everyone's input that has been respectful. And I appreciate everyone who has brought forth suggestions to this process, because this should be an ongoing conversation. And to suggest that we can't have a civil conversation about this, and that we can't offer amendments, and we can't look through this from a solutions-based process and a lens is, it's not how we should operate, and it's not democracy. And I think tonight we've seen a better side of that, but moving forward, I hope that this council, and I hope our citizenry, understands that we are better than what has happened over the last several months. And to speak to what's in front of us as an amended ordinance back to a portion of what was represented and presented by the Planning Commission, I'm all for solving this and moving forward. And I've listened to my constituency on both sides of this, and it's not just one side. And I will go back to, this is not a popularity contest. And, I still believe that this speaks to equality and equity. And for those reasons, I will not be supporting what has been presented to us as an amended ordinance.
Thank you, Beth. Anyone else? Sure, go ahead.
I wonder if City Manager McGowan Crouch could speak to the public about the meeting that you and I and Councilman Griswold attended with the hoteliers in our town. If I don't want to put you on the spot, City Manager, if you may recall some of those numbers given during that conversation.
Numbers, Councilman Parsons, or just the gist of the conversation? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do recall some numbers, but I'd much rather put them in your hands. You being more of a neutral party in all of this. Mr. Patel spoke about occupancy rates in the 7 hotels that he represents in Auburn and Opelika, both pre-COVID, during COVID, and the recovery period post-COVID.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers in front of me, and I apologize. If memory serves me, I think we know this, our hospitality industry has been decimated as part of COVID, and that's a fair statement. And we have heard early and often from our hoteliers. There was Mr. Patel led a group of hoteliers and some statewide hotel associations and advocacy groups to discuss that occupancy was extremely low, and while it is rising, it is still low. And Mr. Patel also addressed the fact that, not that many years ago, there may have been the need for additional hotel rooms in the market. This is information that he's giving us. I'm not espousing my opinion or the city's data. And that now, based on the number of rooms built in recent years and are about to be under construction, there are plenty of hotel rooms available to serve needs in the market. And so I would say that, while hoteliers are reporting that vacancy in their rooms is improving, COVID has played a huge role. But I also think the point was that our hoteliers feel, while they all said they embrace competition, that there are ample hotel rooms in the marketplace at this time, and there's not a shortage in their opinion. But because this is a free market, a hotel, we don't have a restriction on people building new hotel rooms. I think the other things they indicated they had some concerns about was general regulations. Hotels follow different regulations than short-term rentals in this proposed ordinance, as amended, are being asked to follow, and there's a lot of reasons for that. In this city, we are not following any request to inspect a short-term rental property. That is an undertaking that the city's not ready to take on. It is a huge liability issue, as we have vetted this with the city attorney. But hotels tend to be large. They tend to have 50, 100 rooms. They have to have emergency exits. They have to have different fire extinguishers, different sprinkler systems, depending on what they're doing. They're regulated by a state building commission. All their plans have to be reviewed, same as movie theaters, schools, and other large gathering locations. And I think the hoteliers wanted to be clear to the council. They go through a lot of hoops. They pay different insurance rates. They do other things, and that is absolutely acknowledged. But I also, when you stay in a hotel, you are paying for those things. They have that insurance. They're inspected, those kinds of things. So those were the points that they were making and asking. And Councilman Parsons, I don't know if I missed any of their major points. And ADA access, I think, was also just another one that they mentioned that they have to solve for, as all businesses do.
Yes, one other number that struck me was correct me if I'm wrong, I think he stated a $30 million investment just in those properties that he managed and owned.
Yeah, just for his, you are correct. Not even of all the people on that were meeting with you. And it was also Mayor Anders was in this meeting. It was a small group of us, kind of at the request of the hoteliers, to gather some information. And we are cognizant in general as a city staff, and the Auburn Opelika Tourism Bureau was also involved. John Wild was on that call, that our lodging industry has suffered, particularly in COVID. I want to remind you that you have a small loan interest subsidy program, and one of the hotels has taken advantage of that. There are other things, and we'll continue to look as the economy returns and take a careful look at our hotels as a general statement.
Thank you.
When was that meeting?
That meeting was yesterday. At the previous council meeting, the March 2nd, I believe, council meeting, Councilman Parsons asked if the meeting was going to be called. 3 council members expressed interest at that meeting to attend such a meeting, so I set it up.
Okay.
And I believe all of you had received some emails from Vic Patel in general to the entire council.
All right, any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, so at this this time we have a motion.
You got a
Just
motion
roll.
on the table for it's the ordinance as amended because the main motion was already made.
Okay.
So it's a roll call vote if there's no further discussion.
All right. There's no further discussion. This is a roll call to approve the amended ordinance. Okay. A yes is approval. No is not approval. All right. Lindsay?
Hovey,
No, ma'am.
Parsons,
Yes.
Smith,
No, ma'am.
Taylor,
Yes.
Witten,
No.
Dawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Griswold,
Yes, ma'am.
Anders.
Yes.
All right, short-term rental ordinance carries by a vote of 5-3. Mayor, Mr. Dixon needs to return to the meeting and we need to give him a minute.
Okay.
I'll shoot him a text message and we can move on to resolutions as soon as he returns. Greg, watch and see if he comes back on.
He's back.
Okay,
All right.
Mr. Dixon is back. Okay, we're ready to move to resolutions, Mayor?
We are.
All right, under resolutions this evening, item 10A1 is a request from Brett Basquin on behalf of Savannah and Williamsburg LLC for conditional use approval of a performance residential development that includes a 14-unit multi-unit development to be located at 160 East Veterans Boulevard in the Comprehensive Development District zoning district. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this request at its March 11, 2021 meeting. A public hearing is required.
Move to
Have a motion.
Move for approval.
All right.
Second.
Second, have a motion, a second. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to address the city council, please raise your hand and give your name and address for the record.
The applicant's available, should you have
Yeah,
questions?
an applicant is available as well. All right, not seeing anyone. We'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from the council? Okay, seeing and hearing no one. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
All right, item 10A2 is a request from Andrew Palmer on behalf of Mike and Francis Thrower for conditional use approval for a performance residential subdivision that includes 4 townhome lots to be located at 456 Martin Avenue in the redevelopment district zoning district. The Planning Commission recommended denial of this request by a vote of 5-3 at its March 11th, 2021 meeting. A public hearing is required.
Move to approve.
All right, got a motion and a second. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If you'd like to address the council, please give us your name and address for the record. And I do see one person, Ledge Nettles. I believe you're representing the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. Name and address, Ledge.
Yes, sir. Ledge Nettles, 1899 West Farmville Road, Auburn. And what I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that were not shown in the first meeting is ADDU are they're allowed in this zone. We're trying to just do a townhome, development fee simple. We figured it was a good transition unit from what's down the street there down to the single family neighborhood. ADDU you could do, but we really don't want to do that. We'd rather do the fee simple thing. A couple of permitted uses are laundromat and some other things like that. That doesn't seem like a good use of this. So we would just ask that you approve our townhome layout. And I can answer any other questions y'all have.
What's your capacity, Ledge? How many bedrooms are you putting in each of your townhomes?
3, 2, 2, and 3. So it's a total of 10.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Nettles from the council?
I do. Is the parking showing on the front of the townhomes?
Yes, ma'am, it is. They are on site.
Has there been consideration of moving that parking to the back or underneath? I mean, I know it's like a driveway. I'm just curious.
Well, I guess it was just what we had submitted, what the owner had asked to submit, being a similar project he had on Sanders Street. And so I guess with the buffer yards and everything else, we figured it would be more pavement and everything else, really more inducive. It would be a little bit more of a ISR hassle, I think.
Will these townhomes be maintained by one owner, or will they actually be sold to individual owners?
They could be fee simple, so they can be sold to individual people.
But will they be?
That was his plan, is my understanding, is to at some point sell them. I don't know if it's right away. He may be available to speak on that. I think he may be online.
We're looking right now, Ledge. I don't know that we see him.
Okay.
Andrew.
But yeah, he had told me that he's going to sell them at some point. So I don't know if that's right away or at some point in the future.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Nettles? Thank you, Ledge. We'll come back to you if we need you, so stay close, okay?
All right, we'll do. Thanks.
Megan, could you or Katie give us an understanding of what the planning commission's determination was when they turned this down 5-3?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a very broad overview, and Katie's going to pop in and give you some more details. I think the broad overview was there were some concerns about where this area kind of transitions from different housing types to more of a single family detached. That's kind of the gist of it. And there were some neighbor complaints and concerns about it, but Katie will give you greater detail.
Megan, you're absolutely correct. The Planning Commission struggled a bit to find the compatibility with the townhomes in relation to the single-family homes that start about from Spring Street on Martin Avenue, about towards Pitts. The zone is RDD, and that's a large swath of RDD zoning district. And the housing types and the densities vary tremendously within that area. However, from about Spring Street to Pitts is mainly single family residential. And I will also say that in 2018, a 6-unit, multiple unit development was proposed, and Planning Commission recommended denial. Well, I'm sorry, staff recommended denial based on it being out of alignment with the medium density residential future land use, in that it was not part of a use. It was not a use that was promoted by the medium residential development, nor was it meeting with the density, which is for medium density residential is an average of 8 units an acre. So this unit or this development meets all of that. Townhomes are an allowed housing type that is allowed under medium density residential. And it is the 4 units have a density of 8.69 dwelling units an acre. So that's right at an average of 8 units an acre.
Okay, you're saying staff recommended approval of this?
Correct.
Yeah, because of those reasons, as opposed to the one in 2018.
That is correct.
The applicant is on once council members are done. If you have further questions for him, Andrew Palmer is available now.
Okay, all right, Andrew. Andrew, you with us?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Mayor Anders?
Doing fine. Does anybody on the council have a question for the applicant?
It's 4 lots, is that correct? It would be 4 fee simple lots in the.
Yes, that is correct.
And how do you have a flow? I mean, are they 3 twos or 2 twos, or is that, I don't even know if you have that far in. I mean, is that something?
Yes, so based on the design, we'll do 2 3-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. The 3 bedrooms being on the end and the 2 2s being in the middle.
Okay, so you're looking at 6, adding 6, 10 people in the lot.
Yes, across 4 units.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
What is
Hey, Drew,
the,
can you get all those cars in the parking? Can you get 10 vehicles off the street? Is that y'all's plan?
Yes. Yes, sir, we can.
Okay.
And I believe Ledge, I think sorry, I was driving. I was coming back. We got some storms coming in. I was trying to get everything prepared. I apologize for that. But Ledge mentioned something about rentals or sales. I think this is a great opportunity in this area to present some housing that hasn't been available in the past. We're open to anyone who wants to buy, anyone who wants to rent. We're excited about this in that area. So, but we have 3. Each unit has the only parking for the bedrooms for the units. So
thank you. All right. Any other questions and I see Mr. Nettles is also with us. Any questions for either one of these 2 gentlemen?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, I know the area that and I'm very familiar with that area. So if you plan, Mr. Palmer, if you plan on selling these units, what would be the price range of them?
that's a great question. And I don't have a final price with lumber and steel and other various commodities jumping around. I don't have an exact price, but we would be somewhere in, I think they would comp out in the low to mid 2s, somewhere in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Nettles or Mr. Palmer? Okay. Any other comments or questions from the council?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
The lateness of our deliberations taken us to this hour because of the previous agenda item. I can't help but feel concerned that the number of speakers who spoke at the Planning Commission in objection to this development have probably fallen asleep or just couldn't bear with us this late. And it's an unfortunate piece of timing. There were a couple of people who complained about this development. One of the individuals is a homeowner who faces the possibility of being sandwiched in between a multi-family complex to the west of him, and then this complex to the east of him. And then the resident on the western side of this proposed development also had some complaints and concerns about the compatibility issue of the western side of this project to Pitt Street. And I wonder what the possibilities of exist for us to postpone this in order to give these residents a more fair opportunity to plead their case should they wish to.
Bob, I'll let Megan correct me, but I believe procedurally we've got a motion and a second on the.
Postponement's always in order.
Postponement is always in order. So even though we have a motion and a second, we can still move to postpone.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because you had to move the business to the table to be able to postpone it.
So how would someone do that if they wanted to do that?
Anybody who wants to make a motion to postpone to a date certain can do so. We would just need a date to do so. Would need a second, and then it would need a majority vote of the council to postpone it. And I can give a date certain at the request of the council. So.
Take that date, please.
It depends if you want the next council meeting. It is
April 6th
April 6th.
or April 20.
I would make a motion that we postpone this item until April 6th council meeting in order to give the people who complained about this a fair hearing.
I second that.
Okay. All right, so Megan, I want to make sure we handle this procedurally, so we'll handle this vote first before we.
This is the only vote
This
you would
is
have
only
if the council votes in the affirmative to postpone it. It's postponed.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second to postpone this until April the 6th, okay? All right,
You can
We do a
do
roll call
You can
for
do
it.
a voice vote, or
Alright.
you can do a roll call.
we'll
whichever.
try a voice vote. If we need to, we'll do a roll call, all right? So there's a motion and a second to postpone this until April 6th. All in favor of postponing this until April 6th, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay. Nay.
Nay.
All right, that's,
6-3, I believe, or 3 nays. Is that right?
it was 3 nays.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll postpone until April the 6th, okay?
All right, Mayor. Item 10A3 is a request from Sharon Tolbert on behalf of Auburn Housing Authority for conditional use approval for institutional uses for community housing services and an office use to be located at 945 North Donahue Drive in the redevelopment district zoning district. The overall project will include 106 units and a clubhouse. The first phase of the Ridgecrest redevelopment, which we discussed earlier this evening, includes a redevelopment of 62 units for extremely low to low income residents. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this request at its March 11th, 2021 meeting. A public hearing is required.
Move for approval.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. This time we'll open the public hearing. If you'd like to address City Council, please raise your hand and we will call on you, and make sure you give us your name and address for the record.
We have the representatives of the project here should you have further questions, but I know you had a little presentation earlier. And they can answer any further questions you may have.
Not seeing anyone, we'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the council? Okay, seeing and hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries.
Mayor, those are all the items of business we have for you this evening.
Okay. Hold on just 1 second.
I have a couple of questions. If I don't know if that's oh, you got citizen.
Yeah, we're about to go into a citizens open forum. This is an opportunity for any of our citizens to talk to the city council about anything that might be on your mind. I do have a couple of instructions here I'd like to read to make sure that we all understand what we're trying to do here. Citizens communications are an opportunity for citizens to present comments to the council and are not a forum for debate. As such, we ask our citizens to address the city council as a body and not as an individual council or council member or city staff. City staff through the city manager will also direct comments to the council and not the citizen who is speaking. While the council may choose to interact with a speaker, typically a citizen will be allowed to present their comments, after which the council will ask questions or offer comments as necessary before moving on to the next speaker. Okay, so this is a renewed effort to try to make sure that we're listening to people and providing the information they would like for us to provide. We will do this the best we can. I still argue that this will be much easier and much more friendly when we're back in person, which we hope will be next month sometime. But if you would like to address the city council, please raise your hand on Zoom, and we will call on you and give us your name and address for the record, and you'll have only 3 minutes to talk to us this time. 3 minutes, okay? All right. Is that the first one? Okay, Virginia Jones.
Hi. I wanted to bring forth an issue, and I'm not sure exactly how to continue with it, related to accessibility, particularly for those on the analog side of the digital divide. You know, I appreciate the efforts made to provide access to city council meetings and so forth, but what I felt was a degree of disenfranchisement, particularly of our seniors, throughout the course of this short-term rental debate is what really brought it forth to me, but also almost all references to getting more information were for email addresses. And the numbers are somewhere close to 30% of seniors over the age of 65 don't use digital communications consistently. That's from the Pew Foundation. I really would like to try and find a way to bring a discussion forward about how to make the city government more accessible to a wider number of people, in addition to those who find accessibility through transcripts of video meetings and the website itself. I had some very productive conversations with the communications director, Mr. Nelson and Mr. Hoare, related to accessibility. And I would really like to find a way to continue these conversations. Thank you.
Yep. Well, certainly it's been a big source of importance for this council to make our council as transparent as possible, to make our meetings more accessible. We've offered more opportunities for people to speak. This has been a difficult year for all of us as we've had to meet in this condition. And I readily look forward to being back in a public forum where people can come and visit with us. Jenny, certainly we don't want to disenfranchise anybody in our community that feels like they can't touch or reach us. And if there are ideas or thoughts or strategies that help us be more intentional with our communication towards that segment of our population that you mentioned, then I'm all about listening to you and trying to figure out the best way to do that. I will applaud the people that work here at the city and the IT department. They have worked their tail off to try to be as pliable as possible, to try to make our government available to people during this weird and strange year that we have lived in. And I want to thank them for that as we hopefully move towards a more public meeting. But look, accountability and improvement is always something that we should be striving for. And if there are other ideas and thoughts, then I certainly don't mind having a meeting and talking to you about those. So
thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else who would like to speak to the city council and citizens open forum? Is that someone right there? Great. No? Okay. Nobody's hands raised. Okay. All right. Then I will close citizens open forum. And Connie, I believe you had one question you wanted to ask, or?
I do. I just got a couple of questions. If Al is still on the, I don't know if he's still on the Zoom call. I just wanted to know that CARES money that we talked about earlier, do anybody have any idea when that money is going to be available?
Are you talking about the appropriation from the state?
Yes.
Well, the application is due the 1st of April 1. And I don't know how long the state will take to review the applications. It's my hope that they'll get through it sometime in April, and we'll hopefully sometime maybe May, they'll be ready to authorize the release of the funds.
Okay.
Connie, once they release the funds, and if we have any of the programmatic things, utility assistance or other things that come through that, then Al will release, and the city will provide releases saying that we're doing that. We'll try to get word out throughout the community that those funds are now available, and we're ready to receive applications again, as we always do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the other question, and I don't know, those amendments that we voted on tonight, and when would those amendments become effective?
The short-term rental, Connie?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to publish the ordinance, and there is a nuance that would go in the Villager a week from Thursday. So I think on March 25th is when it would be published. And as we implement the amendments to short-term rentals, I'd mentioned this to you guys before, and you'll be hearing from me a good bit as we're ramping up this ordinance. It's going to take 90 or so days before we can take a full implementation look at this. We're going to start sending letters telling people an ordinance has been adopted, and if they are in the business of short-term rentals, whether they can be moving forward in a process to gain a license to do so, or if they need to stop doing what they're doing. We also have to come to you in April to amend the business license ordinance to now address business license categories for short-term rentals. So there's some work to do, but we will be doing work handily over the next 90 days before we really start pushing people hard. You're not licensed, and start working toward gathering evidence to cite them. I also need to meet collectively internally with our staff, the city attorney and the city prosecutor and the municipal judge to determine exactly how we will cite people and how we will prosecute them should they violate the ordinance. So we have some work to do internally, and that's why I'm anticipating about a 90-day ramp up before we really start pushing people to follow this law in a little more firm fashion. We're going to have some friendly reminders first, and then we'll push harder and put a lot of PR out about it. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Okay. I want to thank everybody for your time. Thank you to council. These are 2 long meetings we've had in the last 4 weeks. I appreciate your attention and for digging in. And I look forward to continuing to work this year. We've got some great, exciting things that are going to happen in the city of Auburn here in the next few months. So much to look forward to. Do we have a move to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.